Welcome to Archery Talk 101 podcast, your guide to better archery skills. We'll bring you the latest tips, tricks, and expert advice, but that's not all. We'll also have interviews with top archers and industry professionals and reviews of the latest gear and equipment and much more.
No worries.
Hey, why would you ever want to be an archer? Well, it's a lot of fun. Hi, my name is Roy Canterbury. I'm going to be your host of the Archery Talk 101, and we have an archer on the line that's going to tell us why it's so much fun. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Roy. I appreciate it.
Well, tell us a little something about yourself. Introduce us to your exciting you.
Well, so I live in Central Missouri. I am a father of two, married to my wife, Brianna, and archery for me has kind of been a little bit of family pastime, a little bit of growing with friends. And, you know, in the last, I'd say a good 10 years of my life, it's really got into the competitive space. But overall, like most people, it started with a desire to do something a little more challenging. You know, I grew up a hunter as a kid and got into archery when I was around 12 years old and just progressed from there. And it turned into not only just love for the sport, but love for chasing animals with a bow and just, that zen, if you want to call it, being by yourself and being able to just shoot your bow and kind of let the world and time pass by and just find ways to enjoy it as something you can do alone and with friends. So it's kind of a mixture for me. But yeah, that's a baseline of who I am, I guess you could say.
So what was it that got you really excited about or started in archery?
So, growing up as a kid, we raised beagles and was real big into rabbit hunting, was into small game hunting. And my dad, unfortunately, was a gun guy. He was not much of an archer. And I grew up in those 90s when, Nashville TV and the Outdoor Network and all that kind of was taken off. And you see all these guys on TV that were our idols or our heroes of the day chasing animals with a bow. And it was like, well, I want to do that. I've never done that. Why can't I do that? And at, I think 10 or 11 years old, I got really interested in the archery side of things. And I went to my dad when I was 12 and said, hey, I want a bow. And his first comment was, for what? Because he wasn't into archery. And, it was our thing on Saturday mornings. We would get together and watch cartoons and the hunting channel, or I guess it was TNN network then that we watched, but we would sit and watch hunting shows and, we watched these guys chase deer. And I said, well, I want to do that. And he just had never done archery. And, my dad was born in 1936. So when he grew up, it was, money was different, times were different. And, his dad would give him a handful of 22 shells and say, here you go enjoy life. And he was rationed on what he could do. So the thought of having a bow and arrows and that expensive part of the hobby just never entered his mind. And I fell in love with it. And I can remember my sister worked for a boat company and they built pontoons. So they had these huge blocks of foam when they would get done building pontoons. And I asked her one day, I said, can you get me one of those blocks of foam like, her husband had in the backyard? Well, yeah, for what? And I said, because Dad's going to get me a bow. And so I used to sit outside with no idea what I was doing, shooting fingers on a compound, just flinging arrows, hoping that I could hit this 4 foot by 4 foot block of foam. And half the time I never did. And I was chasing arrows, but hey, I was 12 years old. And instead of sitting in front of a video game or inside watching TV, I was outside flinging arrows. And little did I know, developing a passion and a habit that, now 28 years later is, next to my kids and my wife, it's the love of my life. Archery is what I kind of live for. It's what I enjoy doing. So that's how I got started.
Yeah, that's everybody's got a different story, and it's just so interesting, how somebody would get started in it, and you hear stories like that all the time. It's like, hey, you've seen something, it's like, oh, I want to do that. And nice about archery is you can take it wherever you want. You can take it.
For sure. And it was one of those things that, today, in the world we live in, people would think my parents were nuts. But, at 9 years old, I passed my hunter's education course, which was not really thought of at that point in time. We're talking in the early 90s. And I got my hunter's education course. Like I said, we raised beagles. And so I would come home after school and I would, ask permission, go get a shotgun out of the case and go turn the dogs loose. And I would go hunting that way. And then when I got into archery, it became another way to get outside and another passion. And I can remember at 12 years old, like I got my first bow, I got my first tree stand, and I literally put a tree stand 3 foot off the ground in our timber behind our house. And I would go sit out there with my bow, having no idea how to kill a deer. But I would sit there with my bow, and in my mind, I was hunting, and I shot at squirrels and shot at rabbits and whatever I could. I'm sure the occasional tree when I was bored, but it got me excited, and it found another way for me to get outdoors and enjoy that passion. So I'm thankful that I had the ability to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. You shoot bows. Everybody thinks that you just shoot deer with it, or turkeys. But there's other things you can shoot with. I've shot squirrels with them before, and nice thing now when you're all camo, you're all camoed up. The squirrel can't figure out what you are. You can walk almost right up to them and smack them.
Yep. Yeah. How many times have we been in a tree and have a squirrel walk down a limb, 4 foot from you and sit there and stare at you? And it's like, I'm not wasting a $30 arrow on you today. But when I was a kid, I'd have flung every one I had in my quiver.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as you're not shooting up in the air, then, chances are the arrow will go down into the ground, if you're shooting down.
Sure.
But I just never shot at squirrels when it's up in the tree. If I was up in the tree and it was lower, then I've shot a couple that way. But yeah, it's that's the thing that's so nice about archery is when you're out there, you're all quiet, you're just sitting there still. And I've had birds land close enough I could have kicked them.
Oh yeah,
I've got some buddies of mine, so they've actually landed on their shoulders thinking they were a tree. Just land, like the bird just lands on your arm and like doesn't know that you're not a tree.
Yep. Oh, it's then being in that moment, being out there. And archery, I grew up, like I said, gun hunting and stuff, so it was like we had a couple week window to do something as far as deer or turkey, large game. But man, bow season really opened the door to being able to do more and be out there more. And I think that's what has kept me going as long as it has, and loving this sport as much as I do. Is it's like, man, I'm not pigeonholed to a couple weeks a year. Now I can be out there, 365 days, whether it's hunting or chasing frogs. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can use archery gear and enjoy it. So, but yeah, I can, it's crazy how close you can get to stuff that you don't even think about.
Oh yeah. And then getting so close to deer, you watch the broadhead change colors on the hide as it enters the hide. And
oh yeah,
like, you're close when you can see the hair change colors. I've had that. It's like, oh cool, I know exactly where it hit because I've seen the hair turn from brown to gray.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, like here in Nebraska, it used to be when I was growing up, rifle season was 9 days, like the second week in November. Archer started September 15th and went through December 31st, except the 9 days of rifle. So you have pretty much a long time, here in Nebraska, muzzleloader is the whole month of December, but you had all that time from middle of September. Now it starts September 1st, which is almost too warm here in Nebraska. But so now you have all that time, and then you have a late rifle season, and then you've got a few months in there when everything's just iced over. There's no real season. But then April comes and turkey season for archery opens up through May, and then by that time you've got bow fishing, and you could do that, mostly early season, but you could do that all year round as long as you can find where the carp are sitting.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, we speaking of Nebraska and talking about how hot it is in September, last year a buddy of mine and I went up there and we hunted north central region, and man, you talk about hot. We were not prepared for the heat because we thought, we're almost to South Dakota. Like we looked at the weather and it was supposed to have been, 60s and 70s, and then a warm front rolls in and we get up there 2 days prior to opening season to do some scouting, and all of a sudden the temperatures go from 30s in the mornings and 60s in the afternoons to 40s in the mornings and 90s in the afternoon. And it's like, oh my gosh. And we were hiking 5-6 miles from the truck every day. And the first day we went out, we had a 2-liter bladder full in our backpacks and brought an extra Gatorade and thought, man, we got plenty, and we knew we were doing an all-day hunt. Holy cow, the walk back, we were looking at each other like, if we could wring sweat out of our jacket or anything to where we could get water in us, get some type of liquid. We were both so cottonmouthed. And you don't think about early that time of year, because most guys go to the mountains or they go somewhere out west when it opens in September or late August, and the temperatures that high up in elevation are much cooler. But in Nebraska, it's like, oh, we can go in September, it'll probably be cool. No, it was 98 degrees, and we were not prepared. We were so dehydrated when we got out of the field that day. I think we drank 4 or 5 big 32-ounce Gatorades and water, and then felt like crap all night, tried to digest all that. But it's that's the fun part about archery, I think, is just what you said. Now September 1st in a lot of states, even August in some, there's velvet seasons, there's early season elk hunting, that sort of stuff. And it's like, man, you really sit down and look at a calendar, and it's like, I got 120 plus days for the next 4 to 5 months to be able to hunt. And if it wasn't for archery, we wouldn't have that opportunity.
Right. Here in Nebraska, if you just rifle for deer, you've got 9 days in November and another 9 days in January, and that's it. You've got those 2 seasons. And January can be, you don't know what January is going to be.
Brutal.
Oh yeah, November can be pretty cold, but January, it could easily be below 0.
Oh yeah,
and wind blowing,
especially with wind chill.
Oh yeah, some of those wind chills will just knock you out.
Oh, and you guys have such an amazing state there. I mean, I've been up and hunted it during gun season in the Northwest, and been there in the North Central during the opening of archery, and came back there and hunted in December. And you're not kidding. I mean, from one end of the state, the temperatures are so vastly different, because as you're in the Southeast, it's kind of like being in Missouri when you're in the Southeast part, but you go to the Northwest, and it's almost like being in the lower elevation of the mountains out west. And it can change so drastically. When we were out there in November, I think it was, we went to the Northwest area. It was like, I don't know, 60s most of the days that we were out there. And then one night we went to bed and we were sleeping in a box trailer, and the generator kicked off, and I got up to go fill it up so we could run the electric heaters. And I jumped out of the trailer into 8 inches of snow, and they had even talked about having snow. And it was like, really? But yeah, I enjoy coming out there. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great topography to hunt. But
yeah, there's anywhere from, here on the eastern part, where I'm on the eastern part in between Omaha and Lincoln. And, we have hills, we have a lot of forests, and then you get further west and you got the big plains, the sand hills. You might be out trying to walk right through sand and
oh yeah,
hunting the muleys out there that are completely different to hunt than the whitetails around here.
Oh, you ain't kidding. And it's the topography makes it so different. Because like you said, you get through the sandhill section, and you go from grass and just big open prairie to all of a sudden it's almost like a mountain. I mean, it looks that topography. Yeah, it may only be 4,500 or 5,000 feet in elevation, but it's crazy. And then you go to the southern part and you get along the Platte River, and it's just big cottonwood bottoms and agricultural fields. And I mean, it's just from, like I said, one end of the state to the other, it's so drastically different. And where I live in Missouri, we either have the Ozark Mountains in the southern region where it's all woods and maybe cattle pastures. And then you hit the Missouri River north, and it turns all into agriculture with a mix of hardwoods. But, we still have somewhat of a drastic topography change, but nothing like Nebraska's got, for sure.
Yeah, each state's got their unique qualities about it. And, everybody likes the state they're living in. Otherwise, we wouldn't live here, right?
Oh, for sure. And it's, when talking about the archery aspect of it, like, there's so many different styles of hunting that you can do. Like Nebraska, for instance, you can do spot and stalk in the grasslands out in the west side or through the sand hills area. You can saddle hunt or tree stand hunt and a lot of it, or you get down in the agricultural area, you can hunt field edges and crops and hunting blinds or however you want. I mean, it's just you can travel the state with the season almost and change how you want to hunt it.
Yeah, and then you have so many options too, as far as what kind of bow you want. You want a long bow, you
Yep.
want a recurve, you want a compound, you want a crossbow. Here in Nebraska now, those are all legal archery weapons.
Right.
Many years back, the crossbow was considered it during the firearm season, and only if you had a doctor's note, a physical inability to draw and hold a traditional type of bow, whether it be a longbow, compound, then you could use crossbow in it. But I think they finally figured out that you really don't have much of an advantage for a crossbow. In
Yeah.
fact, you don't have to draw, and you can hold as long as you want, because
Yep.
it's mechanically held back.
Correct.
And I don't use one. My son's got one, but I just use a compound. I do have a recurve that I shoot for bow fishing, but it's like I say on a lot of podcasts, what is archery? Archery is a stick with a string flinging another stick.
Right. Yeah.
If it fits in that, then it's archery.
Yep. And I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. And, for the longest time, I was really myself, I wouldn't say against crossbow hunting. It was just, I saw too many negatives that could come out of it. Um, you know, Thinking about the amount of people, most archers, and I say most, but realistically, you've got to spend a lot of time with that bow to get proficient
Right.
with it and understand it. Whereas I know a lot of guys that have switched, and gals too, that have switched to crossbows, and I understand their purpose behind it. It's because they don't spend the time with their bow practicing the way that they should to be proficient. And in that aspect, I think that's a good thing, because it's kind of like shooting a gun. They can go out and shoot a handful of bolts prior to season and know, okay, it's sighted in, it's shooting well. I can go out, and if they limit their range, it's a good thing. But I, like my mother, for instance, has never bow hunted a day in her life, and she came to me this year and said, "I want to go hunting with you, and I want to try to draw Kansas when you go out there, but I don't want to gun hunt. I want to use a crossbow." And it's like that opened my mind to, wow, there's really other ways to get people out there that, like my mother with wrist issues and everything else, would never be able to shoot a standard compound, or especially a longbow with the increase of pressure.
Right.
But now I've got an opportunity with a crossbow to get her out in the field and go hunting. And she's well aware that, okay, if it's not within probably that 20 to 30 yard window that we've been practicing, it's going to be National Geographic Day, and you're just going to sit and watch the animals, because that's where you're limited to. But I used to be totally against it, but now, as I've got two little ones coming up and I've got my mom wanting to hunt, it's kind of like, wow, there actually could be a use for them a little bit, to get some people afield that maybe could or couldn't do it. My daughter, she's excited with the thought of, watching Meemaw shoot a crossbow. It's like, wow, I'd get to go do that too, right? And it's like, yeah, eventually. And yet, she sees me shooting a standard compound or a longbow, and she's like, well, I'd rather do that. And it's like, whatever it takes to get them interested and get them started. There's always a transition, I guess, from one to the other. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I've relaxed my thought a little bit about the crossbow hunting, but I still believe that in most cases it should kind of be like rifle hunting or firearm hunting. Maybe it should have its own season and not just be open to the rest, because I don't know. I guess it depends on where you're from or what you believe, but I see the benefits and the negatives to it a little bit. But
well, everybody thinks, the crossbows, you have all this advantage. Well, how many times can you get a second shot with a crossbow? I don't know of anybody that's ever been able to get a second shot.
Nope.
I was out and I shot one deer, turned around, drew back on another deer, and shot one coming from the other direction. So I shot two deer within maybe a minute of each other.
Yeah.
And the second one didn't even know I shot the first one because it run off
Yep.
the other direction. You can't do that crossbow. For one, you couldn't cock it quick enough, and they make a whole lot more noise.
Yep.
So, and you might have a little bit longer range, because you can hold it, you hold it more like a rifle and you can hold it steady.
Right.
And, but there's not, for me, I don't see enough advantage for me to want to do it as long as I can still shoot my compound.
Yep.
What a lot of people will say, the compound shooters say that about the crossbows. Well, the traditional say that about the compounds because it takes, the least amount of practice to get in archery is a crossbow.
Right.
So the least amount of practice, the time, not everybody has hours every day they can practice, and then the compound shooter takes more time. And then your recurve and longbow shooters take even more practice to get good at it. Even, you have those with sights on them. And then you take the ones that have just complete bare bow, and that takes even more practice with it. And, so it's just all, for me, I don't care which one of the 3 styles you shoot or 4 styles, I kind of put longbows and recurves in the same category, but they're actually 4 different styles. And, just in the differences in compound. When I first started, got my first compound. Well, the first compound I shot was in the 70s. It was Bear Whitetail 2. My brother bought
I
it.
think everybody started with that.
That's pretty much all there was. And then when I bought my first bow, it was an American Challenger, which eventually got bought out by High Point. That was an interesting story on why I had to get rid of that bow. I was getting ready for hunting, like a week before. I'm down doing practicing, making sure the sights are in, and I'm shooting at 20 yards and I'm adjusting the sight. I shoot some more. I shoot another round, just the sights, shoot around, just the sights. Nothing is staying in. So I said, okay, I'm going to go up close and see what's going on. I drew back and shot, and I'm holding the bottom half of the bow in my hand, and the top half come back and smack me in the chest.
Yeah,
it was the bow itself. Now you won't have that problem with the new bows because they're extruded aluminum. This is a poured riser, and
back when they were magnesium casting.
Yeah, and it just had a defect in it, and it just finally was starting to work. And what it was doing was, as it was starting to fail, it was moving, and then I'd have to move the sights, and they'd move some more. The sights eventually get broken. I'm holding the bottom half of my bow in my hand, and then top half's kind of dangling down after it smacked me in the chest.
My buddy that actually kind of got me started in the target side of things used to tell me similar horror stories of like the XI bows when they were the speed demons back in the day. And he said the same thing. Like he went to many 3D tournaments and be shooting with guys on a practice line, and all of a sudden bows like you're talking would just come apart, and they'd still have the handle in their hand, but the rest of the bow was laying behind them and all wrapped up around them. And thankfully, most archers today will never experience that with the change in technology and manufacturing. But
yeah, there's so much better now. And back then, we're trying to get as much speed out as I can. I never shot more than 70 pounds on any of my bows, but some of the guys would shoot 80 pounds, 90 pounds, and we're putting overdraws on them to make them faster, get as much speed as we can. So now you got your hand there, and your arrow is actually behind your hand, back or about where your wrist is, because you got such a long overdraw on it, because the brace height is so long on some of these bows, and just to get the speed out of them. And when I started doing them, I didn't really like the overdraws, because that put that arrow way back behind your hand. They ever fell off the rest. Yeah. I had one guy come in when one of the places I was working. I think I was over at Bass Pro, working in an archery shop over there, archery department over there. And that's why I always had the arrow in front. So the broadhead is in front of your hand at all times. At full draw, it's in front of your hand. That's how I'd size them. And I says, I say, okay, think about what happens if you're at full draw and the arrow falls off the rest somehow. Maybe you're moving around, it falls off, and it sits on your hand. right there at the seam, that's where it's going to fall down and hit. And it's kind of wedged in there. You can't let down because it's going to put it through your hand. You can't shoot because it's going to shove it through your hand. And this guy walks in, has a nice little 3-cornered scar right in that spot in his hand. The arrow fell off. He didn't realize it and fired it and shot it through his hand.
Oh, that gives me chills just thinking about it.
You got to think safety first. If that arrow would have been longer, not try to go with the overdraws. I don't know if it was on overdraw, how it didn't, but it had to have been off an overdraw, because otherwise it's not going to fit on your hand, because your draw link is actually supposed to be longer than that. You take your draw length is basically in front of your riser, 1 3/4 inches in front of it, and that's where your arrow should be cut, and that's basically your draw length. And by doing that, you're never going to shoot through your hand. Now, if the arrow breaks, that's a different story altogether. We don't have that too much in carbons. And we don't shoot wood out of compounds, because they won't take it, they'll snap. But aluminums, you can shoot those and they have a failure, and then they can break, because it's aluminum. As you flex it, shoot. If anybody's ever seen a high-speed slow motion video of an arrow being shot, it just flexes all over the place. It's just kind of flopping all over. And if you have too weak of a spine, you can snap them. That's why you can't shoot wood. I had one guy one time tell me, yeah, you can shoot wood out of a compound. Maybe some of the very first ones that had very little let off. And you can go ahead, dude. If you want to do it, go right ahead.
No thanks.
I'm gonna say nope. You can do it and take a chance of snapping that wood, because how do you break a piece of wood? All of us martial arts have done this many times. You take a board, a pine board, about 1 by 12, and cut it, 10, 12 inches, and you smack with your hand. You don't hurt your hand, but the wood just breaks, because it is the speed and the power in it, and that's what a bow does. It puts a lot of speed and power all instantly, and the arrow can't keep up with it, and then they break. So, well, safety precaution here: never shoot wood arrows out of a compound. I don't care what they are.
Well, and I have an unfortunate horror story to the carbons breaking. We were at the Missouri State ASA probably 3 years ago. I think it was, might have been 4, but I think it was 3 ago. And one of my buddies was shooting that weekend, and we shot different classes, but shot similar bows, similar drawings, all the rest of that. And I'd got done earlier before him, and so I'd went and put my stuff away, and then afterwards we'd all get together and talk about the day, whatever. Well, then they kind of got in this betting war and said, hey, let's go out here, and we're all going to go to dinner. And they said everybody gets one arrow closest to the middle, and whoever the loser is has to buy everybody's dinner. And it was like, all right, well, let's go. I said, well, I'll just shoot your bow, because I already put my stuff up, and I'd shot his bow before, and we're similar draw lengths and whatnot. And so I said, I'll have to shoot your release and everything, because I don't have anything. Well, earlier that day, where we were shooting the tournament, it was extremely muddy, and he had fallen. And when he fell, he had shot his 2 targets, or shot a target, whatever. Well, he was continuing to shoot that arrow through the rest of the day. Well, when he fell on his quiver and didn't think nothing of it. So he had fallen on his carbon arrows, and I guess one of them had experienced a crack, and he shot the first arrow at the target, and then he handed me his bow and gave me one of the arrows out of his quiver. Well, it just so happened it was the arrow that had broke, and I came to full draw, and the release of that arrow, I had a nice big raspberry show up on my forearm because that arrow exploded. Thankfully, it had left the riser before it came into pieces, but that power from the bow, the power curve of the bow, shattered that arrow as it left the riser into about 4 different pieces, and it torqued the bow in my hand. And when it did, it put about a little bigger than a baseball sized raspberry immediately in my forearm and stuck out about an inch. So I guess to your safety note about wood arrows, always make sure you flex your carbon arrows and know that your good friends didn't fall on them before you shoot them.
Yeah.
Because that could have been really bad.
So that's always kind of a good habit to get in, is flex your arrows, especially if you've fallen or anything like that on them, because you know, you want to make sure that they're safe, and you know,
Oh yeah.
the aluminums, you know, didn't, you know, you didn't quite have that much trouble with, but you have them bent.
Yeah.
You know, and then once they start bending, you know, I've got two arrow straighteners that we used to use for straightening aluminum arrows. I never got one to shoot any better. You know,
No.
you straighten them out, get them. No, it just never really
It,
did any good. But you
it
know,
creates
I
a weak
was
point in that metal somewhere.
right, and you know, how do you break a piece of aluminum? You just keep flexing, and it'll eventually break.
Yep.
Well, every time you shoot it, it flexes, so eventually it's going to break. Although some of them, you know, pretty tough. We've had some of the game getters, you know, those that don't know what a game getter is, it's aluminum arrow and their green shaft, you know, and anodized green. And we've shot them so much that the tip of it is silver. Wore all the
Oh wow.
anodizing off, you know.
Wore it
So
off.
yeah, we wore it all off. The tip of these game getters are shiny instead of being green. But yeah, I was at an indoor 3D tournament one time, and I was like, seems like this, I was always shooting one off, you know, throwing into the, you know, the almost in the fives, and it's, so finally that's okay, I'm gonna spin it. So I spin it, it's like, oh, that's good. That was bent. So then I put a different spot. You know, I've been shooting a bent arrow.
Yep.
You know, and
Yep.
I used to shoot the double X78s, which are a 1.5 thousand straightness. That at that time, that was the straightest aluminum you could get.
Yeah.
And you know, with it being bent, oh, it was so far. It's like I'm not even anywhere close, and it's what's going on? And I found out, I was like, okay. So then you pull the knockout, so you can't shoot it.
Yeah. And the
And
integrity of those 78s seemed to be so much stiffer than the 75s that once they got out of being straight, there was no fixing them.
no. And I shot 25-12, so that was a big fat
Yep.
shaft, and you know, fairly thick, and you know, not super thick wall, but um, for those that don't know what aluminum and how they're sized, a 25-12 is 25 thousandths wide, makes a quarter of an inch, and the thickness is 12 thousandths of an inch thick. So you've got, you know, quarter inch by 12 thousandths wall. And you know, 21/17 is a 21/64 diameter, and 17 thousandths wall thickness. So the first one number is in 64ths, and the second number is in thousandths. So if anybody says, you know, they're shooting 21/17s or whatever, now you have an idea of what they are. You can shoot over spined arrows. The spine chart said what I was shooting, I didn't need a 25-12. But I was shooting the 25-12. It's way over spine, but you know what? It shot great out of whatever bow I was shooting it out of.
Yeah.
You
You
can
can
go over
normally make
spine.
that over spine work and make it tune a lot easier than you can the under spine.
Well, under spines are dangerous. And you
Yep.
know, a lot of people like to shoot into papers, as you know, papers, the end all on everything. It's like,
Yeah.
no, I can take a perfectly tuned bow and shoot perfect holes. I can take that same bow and make it shoot terrible holes
Yep. Yep.
just by the way I grip it and hold it. In fact,
Yep.
just by the way I grip it, because I don't hang on to my bow. If I don't have a sling, my bow drops every time if I don't have a sling. So I don't hang on to it.
Yep. Less hand torque, less option to mess it up.
Yeah. And you know, it's kind of, you learn those things over the years. And you know, in 95, I was learning the back tension release as also being become a archery instructor. And so I, you know, teaching back tension release, and I'd been doing martial arts for many years, and I just kind of merged the two techniques into what I think works the best for me.
Yep.
And everybody I've taught that use that same technique has improved their skills. And you know, one of the things, I've said this on a couple of other podcasts, but I used to keep a string, because you know, having the store, I had a big roll of loop material. You know, I didn't
Yep.
have the little bitty cut ones. That's a great big long roll. I don't know how they've had it when I bought the store. They had it. I've still got the roll. I still haven't used it up. I don't think I'll ever use that roll up. And on there, all my strings are all made the same. So I'll put the bead on the end, put it on there. I got a mark at 4.5 inches. I cut it, flare it out, burn it. That's the size of my loops. That's the size I make them all, 4.5 inches. And it turns out to be, you know, kind of perfect size. Now, some of your jaws have real big pieces on them, and then you have to make them slightly longer because you can't get the jaw on with the knock on there. But most of your releases are just fine. I have a hook on mine, and I have a handheld that works really good. But yeah, it's one of those things I used to keep my 3D rig is I had a string that had a loop that fit around my thumb. That was my draw length. So now I got my draw length, and as I'm practicing trying to shoot, if that string comes flying straight off my hand, straight to the target, I got a good form. If it hangs up on my thumb or goes off to the side, something wrong with my form. Because the most efficient way is to go straight to your target, push to your target. And there's many times I took that and I'm shooting. It's like, that's hanging up. What's going on? So then I go through and everything. It's like, okay, 3 or 4 times. All right, it's worked good. And then you keep shooting good again. Just
And
one
it's
of those
so
things
simple to, you talk about that, and it's so simple that, one little misalignment of the elbow or tilt of the hand. I mean, there's so many different things that you could just easily get lazy with and not pick it up. But having something like that, you don't have to shoot the bow to figure out what you're doing wrong.
right. And I would take, now when I first learned it in 95, it's a VCR. That's how we recorded everything, because your phones did not record video. Your phones were for talking, period. And then it took me a long time before I was like, okay, I have no choice. I have to get a smartphone. I wanted a phone that made calls, made quality calls. I didn't worry about it. Getting the smartphones, they're good at everything else except making calls. I've had some of those, like, I can't make a phone call, but I can do all this other stuff. Like, I want to talk on the phone. Now they get a little bit better, but
yeah, and they don't come in a bag anymore. So we're
yeah,
light years ahead, right?
I can remember those. My brother had one of those bag phones for a while. I never did because I wasn't much into that at that time, but the other things. But yeah, it's interesting when you start teaching people how to shoot and go through the step-by-step process of figuring out what's the best way for them to shoot. You have your way of shooting. I have my way of shooting. We're both, I'm assuming you're using back tension release. Most top archers are. The way you do your back tension may be a little bit different than the way I do mine, but it's still the same technique. And I've taught hundreds of people how to shoot, having an archery store and then working at both Bass Pro and Cabela's. I've taught hundreds of people how to shoot and improve their shooting. And what I found is most people shoot too long of a draw length. Yeah, pretty much if you haven't come to me or somebody that teaches the style that I teach, you teach, your draw length is probably too long. And if you're using a wrist strap, I tell people, I had one instructor at college, found he was a bow hunter, and I said, I'm going to give you a first lesson for free. Quit pulling the trigger. It's like, huh? Like, quit pulling the trigger. Well, how do you don't do that? I just know. I'm right 99% of the time. You're pulling the trigger. And and then just say, well, do this. But I when I teach, I explain why I'm telling you to do it this way. Because if you understand the why, the how is easy.
Yep. I think that you're 100% correct. I mean, a lot of times it's draw length is the most overlooked aspect of what's going on in archery for most archers, especially beginners or even good intermediate archers. It's all about, well, I don't like this release, or I don't like the grip on this bow. I don't care which one you pick up. I mean, I'll be the first one to say, to this day, I still can't shoot a button. And the reason I can't is because I've struggled with target panic for years and years and years. And if you put something in my hand that I can control, then my mind goes off in la la land and I punch and can over control something. But, that draw length aspect, if you get it right, it doesn't matter what release you pick up. It doesn't matter what bow you pick up. If it's fitted to you correctly and you follow the correct process steps, you're going to execute good shots. And it's just hard for people to understand that. And I've seen the other side too, is, everyone used to take, arm width or height and times 2.5 and all the different equations. And it's like, so everyone's built differently. our chest
Right.
length is different, our arm length is different. And it's like, granted, you may come very close to what that draw length needs to be, but then it's about looking at somebody and fit placement to nose, mouth, hand, jaw, all the rest of that, and make minor adjustments. So it's like so many people have lived and died by a specific way of finding somebody's draw length. And, if I go to someone and get measured, they look at me and say, well, you're a 31.5 inch draw. And it's like, okay, but I'm not. I'm actually 32 1/16 if you want proper fitment. And all that depends on the length of the bow and the string angle and all the rest of that, because they all vary a little bit. I'm around 32 plus or minus a 16th. But if you do it just based on numbers, I'm shorter than that. But if I pick up a 31.5 inch draw, I can't even get the string to my face because of the way my arms and my shoulders are built. And
Right.
it's you're right. I mean, man, it's so funny. And then I look at guys that come in and it's like, oh, I got fitted for this, and they're short armed and narrow shouldered, and all of a sudden they are like this and they're leaning way back, and it's like, you
Oh,
are 2 inches too long. Come on, what are you
right.
doing? Yeah, it's crazy because it's people think that you can. I mean, don't get me wrong, technology is a great thing, and there are really good sights and releases and bows and whatever else. But man, the number one proponent to being accurate is having proper fitment. And if you can
Right.
get people
Right.
fitted correctly, all the rest of that stuff is, it makes a difference, but it's minuscule. It's small little improvements versus proper fitment, I believe anyway.
Well, I use that method all the time. You measure your wingspan and then figure that out. But that's my
Yep.
starting point.
Yep.
Very, very seldom do I actually end up with that length.
Yep.
Majority of the time, it's shorter than that,
Yep.
just to get them to fit. But I need to know where to start. Do I need to start at 29? Do I start at 28 or 30? You measure it out, and then okay, now I know where to get into. Like I measure you out, you're 31, so I know I would have to go to 32 because 31 may be too short, and I can adjust them down. And a lot of them don't have the adjustability in the old ones that they do in the new ones.
Oh, for sure.
So like some of the first Matthews, you had a 1/2 inch change is all you had in the cam. You had to get new cams. And then some of them, when I was doing them at the same time, PSC had modules. You changed to modules, so you'd have a 28-inch module, a 29 or 29.5, whatever. So you change the modules out. Well, now a lot of them, you just rotate the module on it. You don't change them. You just rotate it and move pins, and then you're trying to get, it's like, okay, I need to cut this an inch, but they don't make the module that I have, or they don't make the cam. So now I need an inch shorter because I got to fit this person that just can't pull that weight or that draw length. And so, okay, put a shorter string on.
Yeah.
You could drop your weight.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how much the technology has changed. And you talk about the cam specifics. When I started big into target archery, I was shooting spiral cams from a Hoyt, and they were to the 1/2 inch specific. And man, you talk about a major change, because then it became, not only did you have to change your cam, but then you were in a different string set and cable set, and it became, everyone getting into archery now, it's so much more simplistic, because whether it's the rotating mod or even like with Matthews's target bows now, you can buy different modules for weight, different modules for length. And it's like, wow, used to, it was a limb change if you wanted to go down. Now they're running one limb on some of these bows, and you can buy a 60-pound mod all the way to a 75-pound mod. And all you're doing is increasing the flex rate of the limb. And it's like, man, where we've come in 20 years, or even just the last 10 years in archery, is just, it's mind blowing.
Yeah. I can remember taking 70-pound limbs off and put 60-pound limbs on it and short stringing it just to get the weight down from the shoot.
Yep. Well, and it's now, I mean, like, with the Bowtex and the diamonds that are out there, I just got done doing a deal for Bass Pro and Diamond Bows here a couple weeks ago, and was teaching their archery techs about the different models and what was coming down. And it's like, you know, we have been for years, you know, the industry has been like a 10-pound variance in a bow, whether it was 60 to 70 or 50 to 60.
Right.
And then, you know, now I look at some of these bows that Diamond's got out that go from 5 to 55 pounds or 7 to 70 pounds. And they start at an 18-inch draw length and go all the way to a 30-inch draw length. And it's just crazy to think that that technology in such a simplistic item, just this mechanical device, is so varied now to where that 8-year-old kid that's got a 16-inch draw and can pull 10 pounds can shoot that same bow until they're a teenager and be pulling 50 to 60 pounds. It's just what we had to start with versus what they have to start with now. It's like having the Model T that you got to crank to get the vehicle to start and having a remote start. I mean, that's the only way I know to distinguish the difference.
You come walking up, hop in, push the button, go. You don't even have to put a key in them anymore.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I think that's one of the variances too, when you talk about crossbows and compounds and everything else now, is it's like they've almost got to a point now to where if you can just draw whatever back the poundage is and be comfortable, these bows are so much more efficient that they almost will shoot themselves. You get in the way more than the bow gets in the way. I mean, it's, you think about like what you were talking about with the Bear Whitetail 2, and, you know, those bows back in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, they had round wheels that had hardly any let off on them. They had a valley that was this long in the draw length that you had to find the same spot every time. Now you just draw back, hit the draw stop in the wall, and you just, as long as you can keep it there, it'll do what it needs to do. And it's, I think about, you know, the guys coming up in the 70s and 80s and early 90s that were the top level archers. They really shot the bows. The bows didn't perform for them. They actually found how to shoot that bow. Now archers today, and I'm not taking anything away from their skill today, because we have some amazing archers out there today, but it's a different type of skill. Now it's how steady can you hold, how well can you see, how much can you build a forgiving setup. Whereas before, like, it was 90% of what happened, it was the archer. I mean, the setup itself was not very forgiving. They actually had to shoot it. But
some of them weren't very forgiving, but now that we've kind of come back around to not forgiving bows, because as they're getting faster and faster and faster, you know, your form has to be better and better, because, you know, I like to say, the faster the bow, the quicker it magnifies your mistakes.
Oh yeah.
You know, the slower bows are a little more forgiving. You know, once we kind of got past that point, you know, the bows from, you know, 20 years ago, you know, they're fairly forgiving because they're not really fast. So you can make a little bit of mistake and still be all right. But now we've got, you know, the real super skinny arrows with little bitty, almost no fletching. And now then you got a bow that's super fast, and now you make a little mistake and you wonder why you're missing by 4 feet. It's all because you grip the bow too quick or something. That's why I don't grip the bow. But you know, it's so much different now, and I'm still kind of old school because I started with wood arrows and feathers. Because when I started, compounds hadn't been invented yet. Because I started in the 60s.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it's come a long ways, and, you know, just in my lifetime, from, you know, you have only recurve or longbows, that was it, and wood arrows or wood arrows. You had a couple different wood species in there, but that was it. And you're doing fletching with feathers. You know, then vanes started coming out, but they were really hard, not flexible, so you couldn't shoot them on a recurve or a longbow because they just so hard. They'd tear them off because they're just hard and brittle. And now they're a lot more flexible, and they've actually got some now actually designed for your trad bows that are they're more flexible, not really designed to be shot off of a compound. They're designed for that, so you can get it out away from the feathers. One thing I like about feathers, if they, you know, sometimes they'll get all kind of wrinkled up. Just take your tea kettle and put steam and just steam it. They steam back together.
Yep. Yep. There's so many tricks, and that's, it's almost a lost art. The guys that grew up having to play with this stuff and figure it out. I mean, whether it's a vein or a feather, and they get, their memory, especially in the veins now, is so good that, they get laid over and they'll start to come back, and guys will be like, oh, I got to strip my veins. It's like, no, you can steam them. You can go get a boiling pot of water and pour it in a glass and let it cool down a little bit and dunk the vein, and it'll come back. Or you can take a heat gun and just warm it up a little bit and it'll take back to shape. It's like, there's so many little tricks. I shot feathers growing up, because that's what everybody had, like you're talking about. I mean,
Right.
that's just what everybody shot. And I mean, I shot feathers till probably the early 2000s before I stopped fletching even my hunting arrows with it. And I'd have guys all the time, well, how do you hunt in the rain? I'm like, well, there's powder you can put on the feathers that will keep them from getting soaked. It's like, there's all kinds of little things you can do to, make this work. And yet, today we still go to big competitions, especially indoor, and you still see a lot of shooters shooting feathers. It's like, it's not going away. It's just, it's what's the new fad or the new thing that's promoted. It's crazy how much you can still do with archery. I mean, one of my best friends that really got me good into archery, he's still playing with bows from the early 90s, because he's still a limited shooter. He shoots compound, but he shoots fingers and still shoots feathers, still does everything, still shooting off a fisheye off of an old, oh man, I'm forgetting the name of the rest now, a golden key. And it's like, people look at that and think, man, that stuff's ancient. It's like, yeah, and he's still out here shooting 299s and 300s with fingers on an old compound bow from 25 years ago, 30 years ago.
Well, just what you said, it's technique.
Yep.
It was the archer that did it. And
Yep.
yeah, it's some of those old bows are just they're still kind of fun to shoot.
Oh yeah, I have to say, I've reached a point. Obviously, I still love what I'm doing with my compounds, and I, still have a lot of goals moving forward in the archery world, whether it's hunting or target archery or whatever. But I actually went this last week down to Nixon, Missouri, and met with the guys at Black Widow, and went and actually had a recurve built, custom ordered to fit me. And it goes back to what you said about technique and draw and all the rest of that. I'd shot compounds before with fingers, and I was a 31-inch draw on a compound with fingers. And I get down there and we start shooting a bunch of different bows and figuring out, which overall length I want, what weight I want, what feels good. And he's like, so you came in here thinking, you'd be around 31 inches on draw length, right? I said, yep. He said, well, I haven't said anything, but I've been watching you, and all of our arrows that you're shooting, we have gauge marks on to gauge people. He's like, you're only drawing 29.5 to 30 inches on a recurve. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you're drawing. He's like, and your form looks good. Your release looks good. He's like, you're hitting, inside the yellow at 10 yards on all this. He goes, most people we have come in here that shoot instinctively barely hit the bail, let alone hit inside the yellow face of a 3-spot. He's like, so we need to base whatever bow you're going to buy on a 30-inch draw, because after you build some muscle tension and get that feeling back and that memory back versus shooting a compound, it's like, I really don't think you'll draw over 30 inches shooting it, instinctively. And it's crazy to think, because it's like, wow, I'm going to be 2 inches shorter than what I shoot a compound, and I shoot a compound really well at that draw length. I would have never dreamed that what I would have shot fingers on a compound would be even that much shorter going to an instinctive bow, but it is.
That's what fit.
Yep.
I've said many times, a $300 bow that fits you perfectly is worth more than a $1,000 bow that don't fit you at all.
100%.
Because it's all informed. And
Yep.
If you see me shooting, I'm shooting feathers.
Yep.
I still shoot feathers. In fact, I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah.
This is there we go. This is feathers. It's barred feathers. This is actually my son's arrow. And when I do for those listening, I got 2 yellow barred feather and a gray barred feather on a gold tip, traditional shaft. So it looks like wood grain, but it's not. And on all of mine, this is a reflective piece here. So when you have a light shine on it, it really glows. I don't know if this is gonna, I don't know if it's gonna show real well. Get it shining on there. You can see how it, not shining, where it kind of glows when it hits the
Oh
light.
yeah,
And I just
makes
have
them
to have a
easy to
flashlight here.
find at nighttime.
Oh yeah, at night you can find them really easy. That I found one underneath an evergreen tree one time. I shined a light on. Oh, there it is. I'd have never found it otherwise because I wouldn't have climbed under the evergreen tree to find it.
Yep.
But I known it was there. But so if you want to shoot wood arrows, you're going to have to get a carbon that looks like wood, so it looks like you're shooting wood.
Yep. Yeah.
And I still shoot feathers. I got all kinds of them. That's all I shoot still. And I, in fact, that's probably all I'll ever shoot, because when I had my store, closed my store, I got rid of all my vanes.
Yeah.
I sold off all those, and I sold off all the 5-inch feathers to some traditional archers. They like to use the 5-inch feathers. I use the 4. And and I said, when I had my store, I had no fletched arrows. None of mine were fletched. I only bought raw shafts.
Yep.
And they were pretty much all PSE shafts because I was a PSE dealer. And you pick out, you want vanes or you want feathers. You want 4 or 5-inch feathers. You want 3 or 4-inch vanes, and what colors you want. Every set of arrows was a custom set of arrows. You picked your colors, and
Yep.
what colors do you like? Now, if you want probably the best color out on a hunting arrow, pink,
Yep.
because what in the forest is pink?
Nothing.
Your arrows. I noticed you got some, looks like pink arrows back there. They're pink fletching.
Yeah, you talk about it, and everything that I shoot is pink fletchings, except for I have a few of my arrows that are yellow, but those are my 2 colors, is either hyper yellow or pink. And you're 100% correct. I mean, I've shot these in the fall, and even when you're getting all those red and orange and yellow hues in the woods with the falling leaves, you can still find this pink arrow a lot easier than you can anything else.
Is that a 4-fletched?
That is. I run a 4-fletch. This is actually my 3D arrow. This is a 27 VTAC 27 from Victory, but I run a 4-fletch with about a 2-degree offset, 2-degree helical is what I put on them. I don't want my, when I get into fletchings, a lot of guys have really gotten into the helical game, and they try to go 3, 4, 5, 6-degree helicals and put a lot of twists in that arrow. And I have found for me that, and describing it to people, is the faster you spin that arrow, in some cases it will make it more accurate, but it also slows it down a lot faster. So with the 3D game, like trying to keep my speed up, I'm shooting these. They weigh like almost 470, 466, I think. Out of my bow at 73 pounds, I'm shooting like 295, 296 for 3D. And I want to maintain as much of that speed, but yet still be stable. So that's why, I don't go super heavy on the helical or the offset. I don't go super heavy on the vane. Instead of shooting a 3-fletch, I shoot a 4-fletch and step the vane down, so I'm getting the same amount of vane surface area as I would the 3-fletch, but that extra vane helps that arrow. From what I've noticed, it helps it spin a lot quicker out of the bow, but I don't lose as much speed downrange because I don't have as much helical on it. So, but yeah, I've pretty much switched to 4-fletch. I shoot them on all my hunting arrows. I shoot them on my 3D arrows, my indoor arrows. And for me, it's a stability and a forgiveness factor. I have seen forgiveness out of my broadheads when I shot a fixed blade versus a mechanical. I've seen some stability indoors. Obviously, I'll shoot a lot bigger vane to get more surface contact and really slow that arrow down, and like to your comment earlier, make it a little more forgiving inside because I'm not shooting it as fast as I am outdoors. But I also don't have I shoot a drop away, so I don't really have to worry about vein contact. But with my bigger 3 fletch today, with the geometry of the bows and where I find my tune with a bigger 3 fletch, I have to worry about cable contact because of where that flex guard on the cable sits. So
Yeah.
I've been able to go to a little smaller vein and go to a 4 fletch, and I seem to find what works. I can shoot them on skinny arrows all the way up to the biggest 27s, and I seem to have good flight out of them, good forgiveness, and I don't sacrifice a bunch of speed or have any contact issues. But
Yeah, I know. When I was had my store, PSE had done a research on is straight fletch, offset, or helical, which one will stabilize the arrow more. The more offset you put on there and more helical put on it, doesn't stabilize it more. And their results said no.
really,
Straight fletch, if you put an offset or helical, it's going to stabilize it the same. But what they did find is that the more helical you have on it, more offset you have, it spun it faster. And then at the point when the circular velocity exceeded the forward velocity, then they just kind of dropped, kind of like a parachute. Because they're spinning so fast and not going forward, and they just kind of drop. So long range, the more helical you put on it, more offset, more spin you put on it, the faster it's going to drop at longer range. Where if you don't have that, a straight fletch is going to fly straighter longer because you're not spinning it, but it's not as stable. That's why guns have rifled barrels, because that spinning bullet is going to be more stable in the air. Same thing with an arrow. Some spin is going to stabilize it, but too much spin is going to make it drop quicker downrange. They also did a test between feathers and vanes, because 4-inch feather, 4-inch vane. They found that the bow shot the same, same setup. They found that the feather fletched arrow initially was faster than the vane because it was lighter. Downrange, at some point they were the same, and then further downrange, the vane was faster than feather because of the drag in the feather.
Makes sense.
That's what they did a whole bunch of testing on and found out that, depending on what you want to do. I don't take long shots, so, I don't care. I haven't taken a long shot in quite a while because, 3D is where I get the longer shots in there. And hunting, I don't really take them long shots. For one, it's a little harder for me to see that far anymore. You can probably figure out. I started shooting bows in the 60s, so they kind of give you an idea. I was born in the 50s, so
my mom was born in 50, so I'm figuring out where you're at.
Yeah, halfway through the 50s.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, and it's funny because that's some of the testing that I've done on my own, and obviously not to any extent that PSE or somebody like that would have done, but those are the things that I found. I used to buy like the quick spin vanes, and I tried those and put severe helicals on them, and I noticed that I would build a setup with just a straight fletch, and my straight fletch seemed to fly with way less drop out to 50 yards than the quick spin did. And there was always that marketing behind why you want your arrow spinning faster and stabilization and all the rest of that. And I started noticing the more helical you put, the more offset you put, all of a sudden, like what you said, you had this major parachuting effect where it's almost like you reached, we're talking most hunters from 0 to 30 or 0 to 40 aren't going to see it. But when you start playing in target archery where we shot out to 50, or like at the OPA, we had shots out to 100. And it was like you start playing with these fletching setups, and all of a sudden you notice that, that same bobble that you made on a 100-yard target where you hit 2 or 3 inches low, all of a sudden you're 1.5 feet low. And it's like, well, I didn't feel like I made that bad of a shot. What happened? And then you start playing with the vanes and the fletchings, and all of a sudden you can realize that it's the drag that's created And it may be great, like indoors, I shoot a lot of helical on my vane because at 20 yards, it doesn't really matter. So I want the most stable arrow that I can get out of the bow at 20 yards. But when you go outside and all of a sudden you throw wind and angles and distance and all these things in the variation, it's like, I want the arrow to be as stable as needed, and that's it. I don't want to sacrifice anything else once you get outside. And hunting is even more, I got guys all the time that say, well, I screwed this broadhead on, and I got this one arrow that flies great, and the next arrow, it does like this big loop, and I can't figure out what. And you look at it and it's like, all right, well, you're shooting 3 vanes, you're shooting a 3 vane broadhead or a 3 blade broadhead, and nothing is lined up. So now you've got all these multiple surfaces creating different airfoils, and you're wondering why that arrow is not flying consistent as your broadhead. Well, there's not much drag on the front of that arrow with a broadhead, but you stick 3 blades on there that aren't lined up with your fletchings or not, cross of your fletchings. It depends. Some arrows you can find balance differently, and it's just, there's so many variations that get so easily overlooked because, marketing says, oh, more spin will make it more stable, or, just as accurate as your field point, just screw it on and go shoot it. And it's like, wait a minute, let's dive into this a little farther and try to understand what's going on. But
Well, when I have a 3 blade and three fletching, and I line them up so that as you lay the broadhead down, I shoot a Muzzy 3 blade. So you put the broadhead down and the fletching lined up with them. So no matter which way you rotate them, they're lined up. That's where I start. And then that's on my PSE Carrera, which is a 2001 bow. And everybody thinks, they didn't have fast bows. The Carrera was rated at 320 feet per second. That's a 2001 bow. Now where are they up to? They're not much faster now.
No. And the ones that
they're smoother,
very hard to shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, try and get some massive speed out of it. Now, before I was a PSE dealer, I had a Matthews Q2. And that one, I could line them up like I did that one, or they could be 180 degrees out. And that bow, for some reason, shot it, but it wasn't near as fast a bow as the PSE. The PSE was rated 320. That one was, I don't know, 305 or 302 or something like that. So it was quite a bit slower. And I could either have them in phase or 100 degree out, and it worked just fine either way. And what I did to adjust my broadheads is I put what they call the U-bar on. It's a cone-shaped washer and a rubber O-ring. And then I can shoot it, and I can tweak it a little tighter, and it'll actually move the impact of those, get that perfect alignment up for that arrow. And, I set mine up so I can shoot X's at 20 yards with my broadheads. That's my goals, so I don't have to do that. Now, they don't fly the same as field points. My hunting bow does not shoot field points anywhere close to my broadheads. It's off by 2 or 3 inches, but I don't care. When I shoot field tips out of it, they're not hitting where I'm aiming, but they're still going to group. If I shoot 2 arrows at the same, they're going to group next to each other. I don't normally shoot single spots because I've stuck too many arrows together.
Costs too much money to do that.
Yeah, it gets expensive. It's kind of nice to, get 1 or 2 you can hang up, but when you get 5 or 7 of them, something I forget now, and I think about 7 of them I've done. I've got 1 left here someplace, but I had 2 of them when I was working at Cabela's with their arrows, of course.
Yeah.
No,
it's funny when you talk about, the broadheads not hitting the same as your field points. And, I'm kind of like a Tim Gillingham. I spend probably more time tuning and playing and messing around with stuff, trying to figure out why does this do this and why doesn't this do the same thing, and vice versa. And I've had guys come in and, shoot some broadheads and talk about that. And it's like, well, my field points hit, a little bit higher than my broadhead does. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you gotta put into aspect here, when you add broadheads to the front, now you've got multiple areas of surface to create drag. So typically your broadheads are going to shoot a little bit lower, and they may shoot left or right, but at the end of the day, we're worried about where those broadheads hit and how you want to harvest an animal, right? So let's get the bow to shoot those correctly and sight it in correctly. And then to your point, so what if you're hitting the dot 2 inches high or low with your field points, as long as they're still consistently grouping? We care about what your broadheads are doing, not what your field points are
Right.
doing.
Well, and
But
if you want to do that, then some of your sites have a dovetail that you can slide them in, put them back in the same spot. We'll buy two of
yep,
them, just change your sites. Or
yep,
your other option is to just unbolt it and bolt the new one on when you go between the two of them.
yep,
It's much cheaper than buying a second bow, but if you've
yep.
been in it very long, we're going to have multiple bows.
Oh yeah,
You have a bunch of them hanging up back there. I've got one I hunt with, a 2001 Carrera that I hunt with. I've been hunting with that since I become a PSE dealer. And then I have a PSE Scorpion, 2003, I think it is, that I use, when I'm doing target and 3Ds and stuff like that. That's a shoot field tips. And then I managed to get a good deal on a bear. I forget which model it is. If there's snow camo. When I worked at Cabela's, one of those returns that, the
yeah,
strings are all shot. They return them. The string is shot and these new strings. Okay, no big deal. That's easy fix for me. And then there was one of the dampeners, string dampeners. It was messed up somehow. I forget what it is now. And so I just fixed that, made new strings for it. I've never set it up.
yeah,
Because I don't need it. I got two bows that have specific purpose for them. I don't need a third one. If I'm going to bow fish, I'm not going to use a compound because I can't shoot them quick enough to bow fish.
yep,
That's why I use my recurve, because you can draw
yep.
back, instinctively shoot, and go.
Yeah, unfortunately, what's hanging by me is a little bit of what I have. Sad enough, I'm getting into this whole archery thing. I tell guys that if you want to spend money, get into archery or golf, one of the two, because whichever you decide to get into, you'll figure out how to spend money. Because I've got a target bow set up for 3D. I've got a target bow set up specifically for indoor, and then I've got a target bow set up for field or outdoor style shooting. And more so because I have the ability to do so, and I don't want to change. I don't want to take my 3D bow and tear it down and rebuild it to set up to go shoot target archery or to go shoot indoor. But then you would think it would stop there, and it's like, no, now I've got a hunting bow that I tree stand hunt with, and then I've got a hunting bow set up that if I'm going to go spot and stalk and shoot longer range, then it's set up more like my target bows because of what I want to do at longer yardage. And then I've got my wife a bow and my kids a bow, and now I've got an instinctive black widow coming, and it's like, yeah, I need another bow. Like I need a hole in my head. I got plenty of them sitting around.
Yeah, we all kind of get that way.
Oh yeah, and then I've got a couple bows that, like the red, white, and blue one that's hanging behind me. That was the first bow when I started shooting for Bowtech that I got, and I always wanted a red, white, and blue bow, and I'd originally had the white riser, so I took and had it sent off and had a guy that custom paints Harley Davidsons, and I had him paint me a American flag theme to that bow, and he redid all the logos on the limbs and everything else. And it's, I guess you'd say, just a memento. It was something like when I finally made it to care enough to be a part of Team Bowtech and did well enough that they, I guess, noticed me or whatever. My rep noticed me that it was my first bow with them, and so I've kind of kept it as a memento to that time in my life. So it gets broke out about once or twice a year, and we'll shoot some indoor rounds in the basement. And I go back to shooting it, and it's like, man, just 2 years of difference between what those bows were to what the reckonings are now. It's just unbelievable how quick technology has changed, and how much we've changed as archers. And it's kind of fun to go back. I mean, occasionally I will be with my buddy who's, like I said, still got the 1990s relics that he shoots, and I'll play around with one of those, and it's like, man, the archers of yesteryear really did shoot these bows because they knew how to shoot them, because you don't just pick them up and go shoot them now. But it's fun. I don't know where I would be without archery. It's I've met a lot of people. I've done a lot of really cool things. I mean, I've killed some amazing animals. Last year I killed a tremendous buck out in Kansas. And it's just, I've met a lot of people and done a lot of things, went a lot of places. And if it wasn't for archery, I mean, I played college baseball and, you know, played sports growing up. And it's like, I've probably met as many people and made, you know, connections through the archery space as I did working or anything else. I mean, it's just it's a really fun sport to be a part of.
Yeah, it is. You know, you make friends that you know you'll stay in contact with a little bit more. You know, friends at work are work friends, and as soon as you're not working there anymore, lots of times you don't ever talk to them again. You know,
Yep.
a few once in a while you'll talk to, but you know, most people I've worked with throughout the years, I don't talk to any of them.
Right. Right.
You know, there might be a couple that I still talk to once in a while, but you know, the archers are always there. You know, if you haven't talked to an archer in a while, you just, hey, how you doing? You
Oh
know,
yeah. Well, we go to ASAs, you know, we shoot the ASA circuit and there's 6 tournaments a year doing that. And then Vegas and indoor and all the rest of these. And it's, you know, it's funny. We all joke and cut up with each other. And it's like my archery family, you know, we go do things and it's like, it may be the only times of the year that we see each other is at different tournaments or different events or, you know, speaking engagements, stuff like that. And it's like, my wife will hear me on the phone with somebody and she'll say, who are you talking to? It's like, oh, well, that's Aaron or Rob or this guy or that guy. And she's like, and who is that? I'm like, oh, we shoot archery together. She's like, where are they from? Well, it's Springfield or Texas or Iowa or Montana or somewhere. And she's like, how do you know them? I'm like, archery. That's, you need to come to some of these events and see it. It's just, you get places where, you know, like you go to an ASA event and there may be a 1,500 person attendance or it could be a 3,000 person attendance. And yet, you know, there's 150 people walking around there that you all stop, talk to each other and talk about life and talk about kids and family and, you know, stuff that's going on. And it's like, if it hadn't been for archery, I wouldn't know those people. But yet when we see each other, it's like we've known each other your whole life, you know. It's a different aspect. You get a lot of more things come out of archery than just shooting targets or killing animals, I guess.
yeah. Well, and that's why I enjoy doing this podcast so much because, you know, would we have ever met if it wasn't for the podcast?
Unless it was on a range, probably not.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
know, and you know, we're friends on Facebook, but you know, Facebook friends, unless you actually know them, they're just, yeah, okay, I accept it, you know. So you get a lot of them that way that you don't know, you never talk to them, and you know, this is one way I get to talk to all the archers on my friends list.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yep.
you know, I interview not just friends on Facebook. You know, hey, you know, to be honest, if you're an archer, I want you on the show.
Well, yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, it's
whether you're you know, you watched, you know, like the Hunger Games because you know that's kind of back on again now, but you watch something or like you watch a hunting show as archery. It's like, you know, I'd like to get into archery. Well, come on the show. We'll talk about, you know, what it takes to get started. And that's why I always like to take, you know, towards the end, those that listen here, you know, this long, I appreciate it. You know, listen to us talk. I hope you got some good information out of it. But, you know, I always like to ask before we get done, it's like, what would you tell a new archer and what would you tell an experienced archer, you know, on what their next step might be?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. But I think from a new archer, it's find a mentor. I think archery, whether it's, you know, somebody at your local shop, if it's a friend, like I told my story in the beginning, you know, my dad was never an archer. He was never really into archery. I got him into crossbow hunting a little later in his life when he got older and couldn't hunt with a regular compound. And so I had a friend that is still my best friend today, and he's really what took me to the next level. Not only from a hunting aspect, I learned a ton from him hunting wise, but you know, he's the one that really helped me to understand archery. And to this day, like when there's times that I get stumped on something that I can't figure out myself, or I'm having a tuning issue, or you know, I'm working with somebody and it's a form thing or whatever, like there's times I'll call him and bounce ideas off of him and say, you know, well, what about this? Or, what did you do back in the day with this or that or whatever. And I think for new archers, that's probably the biggest thing, is finding a mentor locally that you can feel comfortable with. Because I think a lot of people look at archery like other sports. It's not simple. It's not picking up a pencil and writing something down on a piece of paper. It's a skill that you got to develop a lot of time with. And they say, that whatever you spend 10,000 hours with, you'll become a 1 percentile type person. And I think archery is even more than that. Like, you may spend 10,000 hours doing archery, and at best you'll be average. So finding somebody that will help you along that, because you're going to run into different aspects, from form to setup to target panic. Hopefully never, but it's out there. It does happen. There's just a lot of things that go on that you need that person to lean on. And I think from a seasoned archer, it's, find somebody that excels more than you do. And I think that's hard to do. Is like, at home, we're all backyard warriors, right? We're all backyard professionals that can, I have guys come in all the time, look at us shoot a 3-spot game and go, you mean all I got to do is put an arrow in that spot every time? And it's like, yeah, I do that all the time at home. And I'm like, come on, let's put that to the test. Let's see, because I promise you, when you stand on the line, I'll never forget the first time I shot in Missouri's bow hunter indoor. It was the first indoor tournament I'd ever shot, shooting 5-spot, blue and white face. And there must have been 150 archers on the line at one time, shooting 2 lines, top and bottom. And I was a late sign up. So I was at the very end of that 150 archers. And, the whistle goes off and they tell you to, now is your first scoring in, and beep, the whistle goes off to shoot. And I come to full draw, and I'll never forget, it was the first time I never shot an arrow, because all 149 archers behind me shot their arrows before I could get mine off. And it was just this of all these bows behind me going off, and you let down and turn around like, what was that? Because, you weren't used to it. And I use that as an example, because to this day now, like, that first scoring in, that first arrow, being able to have the nerves, have the confidence in what you're doing. I think for myself and others as experienced archers, it's finding that person that excels, so that you got somebody to chase, somebody to learn from that's above where you are, so that, you can continue to grow as an archer. Because, even the Levi Morgans or the Danny McCarthy's, the guys that are at the top level today, even the kid that shoots with me down here, Remington Boyer, every day I watch these guys learn something new. They learn something about themselves, something about their equipment. You're never, even if you're at the top, you're still not the best. You might be the best that day, you might be the best that tournament, but you still have room for growth. You still have something to get better at. And that's what I think keeps those guys, and keeps any seasoned archer getting better, is being humble enough to say, there's somebody out there that can still teach me something, and go find that person, or go find that level of competition that keeps you trying to get better. And the beautiful thing about archery, I think, and I'll leave it at this for all archers, is that you can never beat anybody else until you can beat yourself. So you've always got somebody to compete against, and that's you, because you're always figuring out a better way to shoot, better way to set your bow up, a better process. So until you can beat yourself today, tomorrow, there's no point in chasing somebody else, because you got to figure it out on your own and get better as an archer. So,
well, and the goal is to put that arrow in the center of the X,
Yep.
right in the center, dead center, pinwheel that X. And when you can do that every time, then you could say you're the best. But if you
Yep.
miss it one time, you're not the best, because you could be better.
That's right. That's right. And it's a never ending learning process.
Well, and that's where a lot of people will get into, or a lot of people, some people anyway, you make a bad shot, and that bad shot makes you make the next shot bad. And then that
Yep.
makes the next one bad. Next thing you know, you say, okay, I'm doing crappy. You know, everything is like, oh man, I blew that one. Well, you just told yourself you blew that one. Ignore it. It's done.
Yep.
Only focus
Can't
on
get
the
it
next
back.
one. You can't get it back. So, you know, there's a lot to be said for, you know, the power of positive thinking. You know, what you think about is what you're going to get. Um, Kind of like, I like to use the analogy when you're aiming. Are you looking at the where you want the arrow to go, or are you looking at the pin? If you're
Right.
looking at the pin, you're hitting exactly where you're aiming because you're aiming at the pin. The pin is
Yep.
there. So where you hit, you don't know because you're aiming at the pin. So aim at your target. Where do you want it to go? If you can see the little X in the middle of the ring, then focus on that center of that X and put the pin over it. Ignore what the pin's doing because it's never going to sit still. The only way it's going to be sit perfectly still is if you've got it mounted in a rigid support.
Yep. It's finding
And,
what comfortable pin movement you can
right.
relax with. Yep.
And when you
It's
quit watching the pin, you're going to shoot better.
it's funny you say that because one of the pros that I shoot with has come in here a lot of times, and he told me before we had that same exact discussion, and I'd say, "Are you staring at your pin, or are you staring at where you want to hit?" Well, I'm looking at my pin and I'm putting it, and I'm like, "You can't. Your mind can only focus on one thing at a time. So when you focus on that pin, your mind says, "Oh, I put that pin over that X." But unless, like you said, it's in a vise and it doesn't move, then your brain's going pin X, pin X, pin X, pin X the whole time instead of just focusing on the X and letting that pin move around in there, because it's like throwing a baseball. If I want to throw a baseball and hit you in the chest, I'm going to look at your chest and I'm going to throw that baseball because that my hand-eye coordination is going to allow that ball to come to your chest. The
Right.
same goes for archery. If all of this is where it needs to be and you're focusing on where you want to hit, that push-pull resistance, if it's in line with the target of what you want to hit, 9 times out of 10, that arrow is going to go there. But it's the split
Right.
second that your mind goes, "Oh, my pin's not at that X," and you look that much, a minute off to the edge, and all of a sudden the arrow hits out of the X, and you go, "Well, why?" Well, it's because you weren't focused on what you want to hit. Your mind went to the pin. When your eyes went to the pin, the arrow followed your eyes. So you got to
Right.
stay consistent to what you want to hit, and it's so hard for most archers in the beginning because they're not used to that. They're used to looking at something and then in their mind, like throwing that baseball, they don't think about throwing that baseball to you. They just look at you and throw the ball. And in archery, they go back to the opposite of, "Oh, I got to put that pin there and I got to keep that pin there
Right.
for that arrow to go there." It's like, no, just look there. That pin's just a secondary object that lets you know if you're close.
Well, it's like
But
your analogy, going to throw a baseball. I'm going to look at my hand as I'm throwing it.
yep, yep.
Where's it going to go? You don't know.
You have no
And
idea.
and you know what causes target panic?
Uh, there's a whole lot, but mostly it's this in my mind.
Fo-
It's
Focusing on the pin.
yep, yep,
You focus on the pin. What's going on in your mind, which I don't think is, you just kind of jerking, and
yep,
you're looking at the pin. It crosses over the target. Your mind's, you say, okay, pull the trigger. So now you're pulling the trigger, and the pin moves off. It says, don't shoot.
yep,
It's like, shoot, don't shoot. That's what
yep.
target panic is. When all of a sudden you say, oh, don't shoot, I can't shoot. One of the things I used to do with all my students is to teach them what a good release felt like and the proper way to do it. I'd have them go back to full draw and aim. I'm telling them, look at the target where you want the arrow to go, put the pin over it, let me know when you're doing that. And it says, okay, I want your finger off the trigger. I want you up, completely off the trigger. And I'm going to pull the
Yep,
trigger. 9 times out of 10, they hit exactly where they want it to go,
yep,
because you can't have target panic when you don't know what's going to go off. I says, that is what the release should feel like. If you don't feel that every time it shoots, because it just explodes and it just surprise, it goes off.
yep,
That is what every release should feel like. So if you don't feel that, you did it wrong. You pulled the trigger.
yep,
And I tell them, it's like, if you quit aiming to pull the trigger. So that's the other thing I tell them too, is like, quit pulling the trigger, because that's a fine motor skill. Humans can only do one at a time. Now you can cycle between them fast enough that it appears that you do them. It's like one finger up, one finger out, and then switch. You practice enough, you can kind of, but you're focusing your attention on this finger, then this finger. And as you're trying to pull that trigger, you have to think about the finger. While you're thinking about the finger, what you stop doing? You stop aiming. So we're gonna hit.
Yep.
Don't know, because you're not thinking about aiming. And I've seen some people with the finger way up by their eye and just slam on that trigger. It's like,
Oh yeah.
And that's what I tell them. I always teach with handheld, with a wrist strap. You don't want on the end, like those of us that grew up with firearms. We put the index, the pad on there. Well, not with a bow. You don't want to bet the first joint. You want to go back to the second joint. And then you let that finger wrap around it, and now you don't pull on it. And when I first learned, the guy had a thing called can't punch, with a little thing you stick on your release, but you can't actually pull the trigger. You have to do the back tension release. And so now, as that finger's locked in place, you just keep pulling back, and it will go off. You can use a wrist strap to do that. Now, the higher quality ones allow you to do it. The lower quality ones, you're going to feel that trigger move. When you feel that trigger move, you stop thinking about aiming. You start thinking, okay, I feel the trigger move. Now you're thinking about the trigger, and now you quit aiming. So that's why you need to spend the money, buy a $300 bow, and buy a $200 release. Better money spent, because it's the release that's going to get it for you.
Yep.
And
that mechanical device of that bow will still do whatever it was designed to do. That release will just make it much more functional.
Right. So, that's one of the things. There's all kinds of things that, we go through teaching with, when you sold hundreds of bows and taught hundreds of people how to shoot, you'll learn all kinds of different things.
Oh, and you've seen it all. I mean, I see guys talk all the time. They're like, oh, my pin was almost there, and I just gradually push it up in there. And it's like, you can't be doing that, because when you're gradually thinking, your body is bracing for impact, going, as soon as it gets there, I got to go now. Like, get it on target and just let it float around on target. And once you build the proper pressure, it'll go off. But it's different.
It's easier to drop down to them a little bit, but you see some point the arm way up and draw back and drop the arm down. It's like, okay, you're using the weakest part of your arm to draw that bow with it holding up. Now you're trying to pull down, which uses the tricep over here. Not very strong. Your biceps are much stronger. But I always taught, the way I learned it and the way I teach it is, before you draw, you're going to point your bow at your target. You're going to lean into the target. And now as you draw, you stand up. Otherwise, what happens if you stand up, you draw, you always lean back. And now you're in a weird position. So lean forward, draw back. I always point the arrow or point my hand straight to the target. So I'm still pushing the target as I'm drawing. Everything's in straight line with the target. And I'm focusing on where I want the arrow to go as I'm drawing, getting everything all lined up. And it just, that's what works best for me. May or may not work best for you, and may or not work best for the listeners. But you know what? As many people I've taught archery, you learn to figure out how to teach somebody differently. Now that I spent almost 20 years teaching martial arts, so they all kind of merge in together. You learn how, this is how you do it, but they're not understanding it. Well, okay, let's move around a different way, teach something a little bit different method of doing the same thing. Same thing's there, because our main job in archery is store energy in the bow and aim. That's it.
Well, and that's the beauty of archery too. I mean, it's not different than golf or a lot of other sports. It's finding your natural tendencies, and how do you take those natural tendencies in proper form to create your shot. I mean, you look at some of the top hunters, the top archers, however you want to look at the sport, they all do it slightly different, but they also all do it the same. And that's what you got to figure out, is how do you find what works for you, whether it's, like you said, coming down, coming in from the side, coming up, whatever the case may be that makes it repeatable. I mean, that is archery. It's doing the same thing 100 times in a row and doing it the same.
Right. Well, and one of the things that we used to do when I was in high school, I was on the rifle team. And as we're setting up, like in prone or kneeling or standing or whatever, um, a lot of prone too. We would breathe in, breathe out with our eyes closed, open our eyes. If we're not on target, move your body somehow. Something's not all right. Maybe you need to slightly move your elbow, a quarter inch, half inch. Maybe you need to bend your knee a little bit more, or move your foot. Breathe in, breathe out with your eyes closed, open them up. Once you're on target, eyes open, breathe in, breathe out, squeeze trigger. You do the
Yep.
same thing in archery. So you come back at full draw with your eyes closed. Now make sure there's, it's safe downrange, of course. Draw back. You can draw back with your eyes open and then close your eyes, relax, open your eyes. If you're not on target, that meant when you relaxed, you moved off. You need to change something. Maybe you need to take your foot position, slide one forward, slide one back, turn your toes in or out. Something is different. So once you can do that, now you're relaxed when you shoot, you're going to relax when you shoot, and you're going to naturally go to your target. So
Yep.
that something I kind of carry forward from, shooting on a rifle team for 3 years in high school.
Well, and that's part of it. I tell guys all the time, like, people will start talking about my peep sight height or whatever else. And it's like, you go back to those simple basics of close your eyes, come to full draw, get to where everything feels right and open up. If you can't see through your peep, if it's too high, it's too low, or your alignment's out, it could be that you're pulling the bow too far left, which 9 chances out of 10, your draw is too long and you're too far extended. I mean,
Right.
there's all these little things that it's just crazy to think about. So simply just closing your eyes and then coming back to reality when you open them up will tell you so much about what's going on with your setup. And too many times we're chasing it with, well, my stabilizer needs more weight, or it needs more angle here, or I need to adjust this, when it simply comes back to the basics of your form or your setup is not correct. And if you can fix that first, all the rest of that is secondary.
I got a good story. It just almost perfectly fits in with that. When I was at Cabela's, this guy come in, wanted us to put a drop away rest on because he just could not group his arrows. He figured something wrong with the rest. It's hitting. He just wants to drop away on there. So I put the drop away on, and as you know, some may or may not know, to test the drop away, you have to shoot it to make sure it's working. Because something's not set up right. Maybe it's not working. So I take his bow, I shoot, and fortunately it's right-handed, so I didn't have to shoot left-handed, but I've done that. I shoot an arrow, stick the next one in there, draw back. I'm aiming to knock at the other one. I stuck the 2 arrows together. And, and the guys in the range, like, it's like, why did somebody do that? Yeah, I've done too many of these. And the guy comes in and says, I couldn't group. I just couldn't group the arrows. And I looked at him and says, I just stuck 2 arrows together. It's one of those, like, it ain't the bow, dude, it's you.
Yeah. The aha moment.
I didn't tell him that, but I says, hey, let's like look at your farm, because there's probably something wrong with it because the bow's shooting perfectly now. And so he went to the expense of buying a drop away rest, having it put on. Well, then we didn't charge to install them, but he had to buy a new rest, all because it probably his form or the bow may not have been set up right. So
yeah. And I think to, kind of what you said earlier, that leads into, with new archers or even the experienced seasoned archers, finding a good coach, finding somebody reputable that whether you pay to have lessons or they do it because they enjoy the sport, whatever the case may be, there's a lot to be said for going to somebody that can pick apart those little intricacies of form or setup or, tune. I don't know how many times, local archery shops have great value to the archery community. Like, we really need better shops. We need more local shops. We need people that can take care of archers, whether it be a big box store, whether it be a family owned private place. But not all shops are equal. And I think,
no.
Finding somebody that isn't just pushing product for a living makes a difference. Because when you can walk out of a shop and you know that they've worked like you did with, the setup of the bow being correct, the form, all the rest of that stuff. We're creating more efficient and ethical hunters and archers, whether it's
Right.
hunting or whether it's target. But we need more of that. We need those mentors and those bow techs, if you want to call them technicians, whatever, that actually care enough about the archer's end result than to just move the product. And I think the more that these archers that are looking to get better can find somebody reputable to, whether it's them personally with their form or making sure the bow's tuned correctly, or, God forbid that you're actually shooting the correct spine for what your draw length and weight and
Right.
everything else is. I mean, we just need more of that, and that will help archers that aspire to be better to go even further and do more, because archery is like everything else. If you enjoy this sport, you'll spend more time doing it.
Right. And we've had some shops around here that the salesmen are on 100% commission. So of
Yep.
course they're going to be pushing the highest dollar items because their commission's larger.
Yep.
And the problem with those is they're going to tell you, like in a stabilizer, just as example, you can buy, when I had my store, you could buy a $20 stabilizer, or you could buy a $50 stabilizer, $60. And, of course, they would push the $60 and say, oh, this is much better. You need this one. Well, they come into my shop, and I've had guys send them to me because they knew that I wouldn't do that. Even though as the owner, the more I sell, the more I make.
Right.
But I would put, like on a beginner, put a stabilizer. I put the cheapest stabilizer we had, like the $10 just hunk of aluminum. Put that on there and shoot it. I'd go a little bit higher dollar one. Put that on there and shoot it. Feeling difference? No, buy the cheap one.
Yep.
If you can't feel the difference, there is a difference, but they don't feel it yet.
Yep.
So why spend the extra money on a high dollar stabilizer that they don't need?
Yep.
And the same thing with bows. Back then, the PSE Nova was the big one. It's plastic wheels, steel cables, just a single string on it. The rest is just cables. And, I had them set up because you could get them like at Walmart and other stores like that. And I actually had one guy return it because mine was a better deal, even though he paid more. Because first off, if you buy it from somebody else, I'm going to charge you $40 at that time, $40 just to set it up.
Right.
And then I'm going to charge you $100 an hour for shooting instruction. And you still got to buy arrows. You still got to buy tips. Still got to buy release. You put straight. So all my bows, my Nova bows, was set up with 6 arrows with tips, a release. Now, granted, it was the cheap True Fire
Multi-jaw caliper.
Right. It was just
Yeah.
at that time I was paying $11 for them. They sold for like $20, but it came with that one.
Yep.
And then we put string silencers on them. It come with a sling and a stabilizer. A lot of them the kits come with stabilizers then. So you had only thing you needed to do was buy a case if you wanted one.
Right.
Now the cheap plain old cases, I didn't stock them because my wholesale price before shipping was $5 less than Walmart was selling them for.
Oh wow.
So I wouldn't stock them. There's no reason for me to stock them. If that's what you wanted, go to Walmart, buy it, because it's not worth my time to take up that much space to make a buck.
Yep.
But I did stock soft cases. And if you wanted, some of the high dollar ones, yeah, I'd order those in for you. But so they're all set up and come with the shooting instructions. So the guy said, yeah, I'm going to take it back because I'm going to charge you to put it together. You didn't buy the bow from me. I'm going to charge you to put it together. And then I'm also going to teach you how to shoot. And that way nobody could price compare.
Yep.
But I was also providing a service that nobody else was giving them. Because I don't think any of the shops at the time was giving away shooting instruction free with their bows.
No. And that's, the difference in shops is you were providing a valued service that, wasn't just the cost of the bow. It wasn't just what you could go buy at Walmart. It was an advanced level opportunity to become better in archery faster because you had somebody that cared more than just moving the product. Yeah.
Yeah. And a nice, for those that don't know, the difference between wholesale and retail on a new bow at that time was $100 to $120.
Yep.
So I've got $100 roughly, I think the Novas was like $80 or $90, something like that was the price on there. So for $90, I'm setting it up for free. I'm giving you shooting instruction. And
Yep.
and right there, my whole cost profit in there was ate up by the services I was providing.
Yep.
But you know, you need new arrows, where'd you go? You come to me. You want to
Yep.
upgrade your sight, you come to me. You want to upgrade your rest, you come to me. You want to do
Yep.
better release, you come to me, because I didn't oversell you to start with. So I'm
Yep.
making multiple sales instead of just one. You know, it's like, you know, a lot of them, they'll have yeah, a lot of business will have a loss leader. Grocery stores do it a lot. Come in, get this. They don't make you know when you're going to buy more stuff. So
Yep.
that's kind of the concept, except you didn't buy more stuff, you did more stuff. And
Oh,
because
yeah.
I taught you how to shoot, you didn't lose many arrows. So
It was
I
the
had one guy
after
come
sale
in.
service.
Yeah. I had one guy buy a dozen arrows. We come back a year later. It's like, yeah, I probably get some more arrows. I'm down 1 or 2 arrows. I forget what I mean. He still had like 10 of his 12 arrows left a year later.
Well, he was either a really good shot or didn't shoot much. One of the two.
Yeah, hey,
Hopefully the
they're
first part.
durable, and you just need them refletched, and I refletched, and you know, I used we had a Joe Jan at the time, which is basically just straight 6 at one time, and then I had some, I think they were BPE or some plastic jig, like I had a dozen of those at the time, and I had 8 Bitzenbergers that I'm fletched with, and they were right before hunting season. They're all going when it's
Oh,
coming,
yeah.
you know, end of the summer. I'm fletching arrows constantly. There's an arrow in a jig all the time. You know, I
Yep.
put the next feather on, I'd go home, come back in the morning, put the next one on, let it go. And
Yep.
you know, most everything I did with fletch tight, you know, that I didn't use the CA glue. It can be a little bit brittle when it's a flexible shaft. Sometimes you have trouble with them. So I
Yep.
just used fletch tight. It was easier because I'm sticking them on, letting them go, and they're all custom made, custom cut to your length, and inserted. And you know, I'd buy tips, and I buy tips in a bag of 100. You know, that way, you know, I can.
Yep.
I went through one time, and I think I've told this on another podcast, and I weighed all my aluminum arrows, so I knew weight of the arrow was already fletched. I had the weight of the insert, you know, I had it separate, and I weighed all my tips till I found all my points. So I matched them up. So I had a dozen arrows that was less than a half a grain difference between the highest and lowest. Basically, as close as you can get to being the exact same weight. And I'm even filing the inserts down. I did it once.
Yeah. And back
Never did
then,
it
with
again.
the way manufacturing constraints were, that was a lot of arrows and a lot of tips and a lot of inserts until you found that perfect dozen.
Yeah. Well, and I made that dozen. What they'll do is they'll kind of match in the package of 12. So as long as you buy a whole package of 12, they're fairly matched. One of the things that I did in the store was I would break up a dozen arrows. Some of the stores, least you can do is a half a dozen. And then maybe I think there's another one. The only I should do is 3. I'd say you 1, because I charge an extra $1. So I take the price of the arrow, say like there's $120, it'd be $10 an arrow. If you break up a set, I'm going to charge you an extra $1. So I'll sell you 1 at a time because I make 12 extra bucks. So I didn't
Absolutely.
care. You know, I didn't care. You could buy, if you wanted 1 arrow, I'd sell you 1 arrow. And a lot of shops wouldn't sell you any less than 3 or 6. And I'm like, I didn't care. I'll sell you 1.
Yep. You'll get your
want
money
one?
back eventually.
Yeah. I'll make more money on the arrows. And, you know, they weren't that much then, but, you know, just made the math easier, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But,
Yeah.
they weren't $120 a dozen. They were probably half that for a dozen shafts. And then I charged, you know, fletch them. And then if you want them refletched, you know, some people just like, well, the fletching's all messed up. And we got a new arrow. No, we just refletch it. We just cut fletching off, redo it. And, you know, depending on whether you wanted veins or wanted feathers, more for feathers because they cost more. And they actually took a little bit longer. Veins, you could actually take, put the vein on, stick it on there, let it sit for a couple seconds, even with the fletch tight, and rotate it, put the next one on, rotate it, put the next one on. So you can do it pretty quick, but you had to leave them sit there until the last one finally cured. Where the CA glue go a lot quicker, but I think the CA glue worked better on veins. It didn't work very well on feathers. Too porous.
Yep. And it, like you said, when it got temperature change, everything else, it would be brittle and crack, and they would fall off a lot easier. And yeah. And it didn't last as long either. That glue, if you didn't keep it out of light and in cool conditions, it wouldn't last very long once it was open.
Yeah. Yeah, it does that where the fletch type will last quite a bit longer.
Yep.
You know, it won't last 2 or 3 years on, opened and sitting there, but
No.
yeah,
No.
I've had something that's open, it's like got stuck in a container. It's like, oh, this is hard. I need to get new stuff. It's just too thick. Like, I
Yep.
can't go with these. I need to get a new tube. Yeah, when it's doing a lot of wood arrows, you get the big hot melt glue, and I got a 1 pound brick of it, because I was using so much of it. I got tired of the little ones, and I end up closing the store before I ever used any of it.
Oh
So I
man.
got a whole great big 1 pound brick of hot melt glue.
Oh,
I don't know what I'll do with it. Eventually, someday I'll probably sell it to somebody that can use it, but
find a wood builder somewhere that's building arrows. I'm sure they would love to have that.
yeah. Well, and you put them in aluminum, you use the hot melt glue because you can always take them back out.
Right.
If you use the CA glue, then they're kind of hard to get them out, or an epoxy. You don't really want to use those. The hot melt glue, you just if you're gonna do that, warm the tip up, don't heat the shaft up, but heat the tip up, and
Yep.
keep pulling a couple
Pull it
holes
right
out,
out.
and then you can adjust them, and you can always use that for tweaking your broadheads too. Put your broadhead on there, heat it up, twist it a little bit, line it up, shoot it, do the same thing until you get them tuned that way. Yeah, there's so many things that we've done, and you talked about finding a mentor, and that's one of the things I set up the Arch Talk 101 Facebook group for, is to be a source for that kind of stuff. So if you have a question, say you have your form, you're not sure what's going on, upload a video of you shooting, and somebody will critique
Yeah.
it. I'm not the only instructor in there. There's guys like you and other instructors are in there. We've got guys that have been shooting longer than I have, and we have people in there that are only shooting just a few months, or a few years, and everything in between, and Bowtech's in there. I've been Bowtech. I've worked on a lot of different things, and you have to listen to one of the other ones. I actually talked about setting a bow up to shoot 2 arrows at the same time.
Oh wow.
Now that was before center shot design risers, which you had a little bit different. There was stick on arrow rests, but yeah, I talked about that. I think it's the one before or 2 before, something like that. We were setting it up. That was interesting, and that's what the things you go in. It's like when I was at Bass Pro and when I was at Cabela's, when I was at Bass Pro, there was 3 other archers in there that had a lot of experience working on bows. So between all of us in there, we probably had 40, 50 years at least of experience. Me and another guy,
That's hard to find.
we both worked at shops. The other 2 worked at shops. So we all worked at a shop. So we knew what we was doing. We could work on anything. The older bows kind of default to me because, it's kind of where I started, on the older bows. And so the new ones that I guys would take. We had, archers get loyal to their tech.
Oh yeah.
We'd have guys come in and say, okay, I want John to work on my bow. Well, John's backed up for about 2 hours. Okay, I'll wait.
Yep.
And it's like, can I help you? I can do it. No, I'll wait for John. Okay. Because I always come in, only want me to work on their bow. And some of them that I used to take care of at this shop when they come into the new place was that, automatically got those. It's like, here you go. Sometimes they were a pain to work with, and I learned how to work with them, and we just worked good together, and others just didn't know how to deal with this stuff. I figured it all out. We got along just fine, and it's just one of those things that you just need to find somebody you trust. And I've got one friend of mine, he was one of my shooters when I had the store. He'd work on his bow, or he'd let me work on his bow. Nobody else would ever touch his bow. Nobody could touch it, me or him. And I know other archers I've talked to that they don't want to do any work on their bow.
Oh yeah.
They found a tech that knows what they're doing, that just takes that, did I do this right? Now they know that this tech has worked on their bow, it's set up perfectly, so it's not the bow, it's them. If you do everything, do the work on the bow, and it's like, okay, now you're thinking, hey, something's not right. Now you think, okay, did I set this up right? Or am my form wrong? No, 90% of the time it's your form.
Oh yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's that thing, between ears,
Yeah. Like you said, our brains only have one track that they can handle. And too many times we're too stuck in our ways to learn that, it's either my form or it's what's going on in my head or it's what I'm looking at. I mean, there's just these little things that, most people want to say, here, I got an issue with this bow or this rest isn't working or whatever. And it's like, no, if you just take a step back and look at yourself for 5 arrows and realize that it's what's going on. It's the Indian. It's not the bow. It's
right.
yeah.
Yeah. I've done that, creating a video, a shot of different stuff. And I was like, damn, my form sucks. What's going on?
Yeah.
It's like, that's not what I'm teaching. It's like, then go back and it's like, okay, now I'm doing it right.
Yep.
You go back and
Yep.
look at your own video. Now it's like instant. You can just pull it up and look at it right away. And, not like when I started when, on the old VCR cameras where you record it, you got to go back. You can't replay it on a VCR because it's so small or there's no viewer.
Yeah.
You put it in the VCR tape and you go in and you can back it up forward. I had one time you could actually do frame at a time, but you can't see everything. And most of the time when I was teaching, I just got to watch them shoot, because we don't,
Oh, yeah.
like when we're at the stores, we don't have really the opportunity to video them and then play
No.
back the video. And if you do it on your phone, it's so small, it's hard to see anyway.
Yep.
So, you're shooting and I'm watching one thing. I'm shooting, I'm maybe watching the hand, see if you're gripping, and then got to shoot a few times. Like, okay, now I got to watch the finger. What's it doing? And you just can't see them all at once because
Yep.
we can't see multiple things at once.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the beauty now. I mean, cell phones are a necessary evil in some aspects, but it's nice that now, I have guys all the time. I'm like, well, just take a video of yourself, like shoot a few arrows, send me a video, let me look at it and see what's going on and try to help you. And like you said, 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, we wouldn't have really had the ability to do all of that and do it immediately. It would have been days or weeks down by the time you got the video and was able to play it on a TV. And we're getting spoiled. Things are just a lot easier now than they used to be.
Well, and that too, we can help more people, because they can do it right here online. And, we could have very easily had a session where I could have watched you shoot and it could have give you critique right here.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
Instant feedback. And then, with it being recorded, then we can always like watch that again later, and further analyze it. And, that's kind of what I had set up for, coaching program was to watch these videos, record yourself shooting, and let's get on a Zoom call and we'll talk about what's going on and we'll fix stuff.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
I've done that with guys before and on a Zoom call, and I've done them with just over videos on Messenger.
Oh yeah, the virtual ability right now with archery or just life in general has gotten. We're light years ahead of where we really thought we probably would be at this point in time with the stuff that we're able to do that we couldn't do 15, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, when I grew up as a kid, we had 3 TV stations, black and white.
Yep. And you had to get up and go change the channel, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And you have to tweak the rabbit ears, and it's like, oh, so you're like, oh man, it's not touch. You have to hold the rabbit ear sometime.
Oh man.
For you young guys, rabbit ears was an antenna that sat up on top of your TV that plugged into the antenna receiver. You kind of like now where you plug your cable in, and it had 2 great big long bars that stuck up at an angle, and that's why we call it rabbit ears.
Yep. It looked like rabbit ears, and you had to change. You had to move them around to get the picture.
Yeah.
I remember when my parents first got a satellite, and the satellite would move, and you would change channels, and you'd have to wait for the satellite to spin in the backyard to pick up the next signal so you could watch a different channel. Oh man. And here we are doing a voice chat and a Zoom call to talk about archery.
Yeah. It's just so much nicer. And, that's what's nice about, what we can do. And,
yep.
It's just so much easier. And I enjoy helping archers out. And, anybody has any questions, get a hold of me or get a hold of Josh. And, or anybody, in the Facebook group, the Arch Truck
Yep.
101 Facebook group. Join that group if you're not a member of that group. We have archers in there from all over the world. Right now we got about 750 members in there. No paid ads run to get people to join. It's all just, people, talking to them and joining them.
Yep.
There's no selling in the group, because that's not what the group's about. The group's about helping you. Ask that question. Like I said, the only stupid question is one you didn't ask. So
Yep.
if you want a stupid question, don't ask it. If you want to ask it, it's not stupid, because it's
That's right.
a question you have. Ask it, and somebody will get back to you with an answer. And it's
Yep.
not going to be one of those, well, I'm having trouble, I'm not grouping well. Well, the answer is not practice more. There's a reason why you're asking, and we're going to give you an honest answer. If you take it, you take it. If you don't, we're going to give you an honest opinion. It's like, okay, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what I see you doing wrong. Try it and see. If it works, it works. If it don't, it don't.
Yeah,
And
it's all about smart practice.
right.
More arrows does not necessarily make it better. I always laugh when people say practice makes perfect, and it's like, no, practice makes permanent. Whatever you
Right.
do, if you're doing it wrong, then you'll continue to do it wrong forever. It's
Right.
figuring out what good things to do so that you can get better. And like you said, there's no stupid question, there's no wrong question. It's just ask it open-mindedly to figure out how to get better.
Yeah, if you're not open for the answer, don't ask the question.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
we're going to be honest. You'd be much better off to go out and shoot 5 arrows and quit than to shoot 50 arrows wrong.
Yep.
Make those first count. Now, when we're hunting, your first arrow is the only one that counts. You don't
Yep.
get a second arrow. So, when I've gone to some tournaments, well, you want any practice? No. I'm a hunter. I don't get a practice shot. I may draw my bow back with arrow in it, because I never draw a bow back without an arrow. Draw my bow back and let down just to make sure everything is there. And my body is saying you can still pull it. But I don't take practice runs. What happens if you take that practice shot and you get a perfect X? Now you just wasted a perfect shot. Because maybe your next one you get off a little bit. Well, now you had that perfect X that you could have counted.
Yep.
Yeah,
And I'm the opposite. I'm the guy that's I'm the guy that feels like I got to go shoot 100 arrows before I go shoot the tournament. And the tournament's only 20 arrows long, but I had to go shoot 100 to make myself prepared. Like you said, it takes all kinds, right?
Yeah, you do need to shoot enough as you're developing your skills. But once you get your skills down, like I said, like you said, you not do perfect practice. You don't need lots of practice or lots of shooting to get perfect. You need lots of perfect practice to get perfect.
Yep.
And what I've heard before, what's the difference between an amateur and a professional? The amateur practices enough to get it right. The professional practices enough that it can't get it wrong.
100%. That's why I'm still swinging from the amateur fence. I'll be in the semi-pro class till I can figure out how to not get it wrong. Because right now I'm getting a lot of it wrong.
Yeah.
But that's archery. That's part of, like you said, growing and learning and developing a skill. And it's there's never an end goal. The end goal is, like you said, figuring out how to not get it wrong. But 99.9% of us, we're always going to get something wrong along the way. And that's what keeps us from being perfect all the time. Yeah.
Nobody's perfect, but hey, we strive to do the best we can. And I can say is like, did you do better than yesterday?
Yep.
Then you're improving. If you didn't, why didn't you? Maybe your mind wasn't in it. And that's one of the things in archery. If your mind's not in it, don't even bother shooting, because if it's not in it, you're not going to do well. And I had one time I was, after all the kids went to bed, I went down to the range, wanted to shoot. I shot 5 arrows. It's like, I'm just not feeling it. So there's others down. I just talked to them and went home. because I wouldn't
Yep.
feel it's like, okay, all I'm going to do is develop bad habits because something's not working right. I wanted to go down and shoot, but just when I got there, it just didn't feel right. Now, if I'd had a tournament the next day, I'd have probably had to regroup and, practice, but, maybe all that would have done is make it worse, so go home.
Yep. I asked Jesse Broadwater one day. I was in Iowa, and we were talking about practice and whatever, and we were shooting on practice bills together. And I said, Jesse, how much do you actually practice? And it floored me with his response. And he said, only what I need to. Said some days I shoot 5 arrows, some days I shoot 500. It depends on what I'm working on. But I set it myself a goal to work on something, and whether it takes 5 arrows or 500, I'll work on that one thing until, like you said, I can't get it wrong, and I feel like I've accomplished it. But I'm also humble enough that he said if I get in 50 arrows in and I realize I'm doing it wrong and I'm not going to have a good day practicing, I don't shoot 400 more to try to get it right. I just quit, come back to it after a while, and start over. And I think that's what's hard for most archers is we get in our head, like my biggest pitfall is when I draw back, my mind is I'm going to shoot this arrow, and I'll go through my process. I'll go through everything that I want to do and know that it broke down and I need to stop. And instead I'll muscle through and complete shooting that arrow. And that was the wrong thing to do. And I did it wrong
Right.
from the get go. I should have let down knowing that when my process broke down, when whatever it was that made my mind go, oop, this isn't right. At that point, it should have been a let down and start over, because if not, to your point, I'm just developed a bad habit, because now, even though it wasn't right, I thought, I can still get through it. It's not the case. You need to just
Yeah.
let down and start over. Same thing with a practice session. Like you said, get 5 arrows into it and know that something is wrong, something doesn't feel right. Don't continue to sit there and beat yourself up about it. Walk away, whether it's for 10 minutes or 10 hours, come back to it later and figure it out then.
Yeah. I know it's just one of those things you gotta, know what you can do and what you can't do. And one of the
Yep.
things when I first learned back tension release, the guy said, once you're back, you're at full draw, and you start the tension pulling back, you're gonna physically start the pull, aim, aim, aim. And he says, if it don't go off within 3 to 5 seconds, let down, start over because something's wrong. So if you're pulling, it's not going off, let down and do it again.
Yep.
And once you get that in there, it's like, okay, pulling. Oh, this is taking too long. Let down, go through the motion
Yep.
again. And even on a time tournament, you have time to draw and let down.
Oh, yeah.
Probably 2 or 3
Yeah.
times. If you draw back, go through your process, and you draw back, you're only spending 3 to 5 seconds. And if it's not working, you go through your process. How long does it take to do your process?
Yep.
That's what you need to know. Okay, my process takes me 6 seconds from the time I start drawing till I get there. Or, like I like to use one of those little sling to put the lower limb in. I put on my rig so that once I start hunting with those, I figured, how did I ever hunt without one? One of those things. And because it's so much nicer to set it in there and just rest the bow on that sling
Yep.
in your hand instead of sitting there trying to hold it. And
Yep.
so
Well,
I
one of my
start with that.
coaches told me in the very beginning, talking about that, holding your bow up or holding it full draw for very long. If you want to know what your body's capable of, take your forearm, make a fist, and flex your forearm. And when you do that, some people most of the time are in that 5 to 7 second range, and then your hand starts shaking. Well, that's the lactic acid building up in your muscles. It's the same difference in holding the bow up, holding it long, full draw. There's not very many people like, Chance Bobeth of all people holds for like 14, 15 seconds, or sometimes some of them are up to 20. They've showed him online doing it at like Vegas. It's not many people that can hold a bow at full draw that long and still accurately complete a shot process, because your body at some point starts to break down, muscle fatigue sets in, and people got to realize what that is and figure out that shot timing, because archery's a lot of timing, repeatability, and it's learning what that is for you. And that really can't be taught. That has to be figured out.
Right. And you got to relax. you have to put tension on your muscle, but you can't be tensed up. And one of the things that we teach in martial arts is, when you're doing a punch, your hands all relax until the last minute. So those that are listening and watching, just imagine, keep your hand relaxed and see how fast you can make that hand move. Now make a tight fist, tight as you can. See how fast you can make that hand move. Not very fast, and it wears you out. So that's the same thing in archery. If you're tense trying to do this, you're going to wear yourself out. Just relax,
Yep.
and once you relax, you can hold a lot longer. For us hunters, sometimes we have to hold longer than the 3 to 5 seconds, but we're not starting our shot process yet. We're just at full draw, holding, waiting to start it, because the animal's not in the spot we can shoot yet. Walking behind a tree, we got to come to full draw before it walks out. But once it walks out, now then, when it's ready to shoot, we aim, you start our motion and aim and go through. And it still should take that same 3 to 5 seconds, because that's our shot process. But we may have had to hold it full draw before we started the last piece of it. And you just got to just spend time having fun.
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's it. I mean, whether it's hunting or target archery or just flinging arrows in the backyard, whatever it may be, like, figure out how to have fun with it. Sometimes we make it too complicated, we make it too stressful. Archery is meant to be another release, a way to have fun and enjoy something, and we got to make sure we don't take that part out of it.
Yeah, I know. Last year I created a little short or a TikTok video or something. I stuck a dandelion on my target, and I'm shooting at the dandelion.
I mean, that's why we do, like, so much with kids. Like, we'll put balloons out there, or put water balloons, something different. I mean, we've shot ping pong balls off of those little air canister things. I mean, they're just
those are a challenge, because they're bouncing up and down all the time.
Yeah. Or that like they do with the recurves, where they shoot skeet and throw those foam discs in there. I mean, there's so many ways to do archery and have fun. It's not just hunting, it's not just shooting a specific set target. It's just, go outside and have fun. I know people that take flu arrows and recurves and go out and just shoot at anything, just to have fun doing it.
Well, he was talking about the aerial one. This last summer, I went and helped out at the Nebraska Outdoor Expo, and they had what they call aerial archery, which they have those discs and the thing shoots them off, and then they shoot them with the arrows, and that was kind of fun.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. Now they've got almost like laser tag, but it's archery tag, and you put on like a paintball helmet and chest gear or whatever else, and you actually run around, and they're like super lightweight, like 5-pound draw, and they shoot an arrow with a big foam ball in the end, and you actually just like playing paintball with bows, but you run around and chase each other and shoot each other with recurves. I mean, they've expanded archery into all this, carefree, fun-loving way to do it. Now, obviously, I don't recommend doing something like that unless it's set up correctly. But there's just so much you can do with archery that whether it's alone or with a team or hunting or target side, whatever. There's so much to it. Just have fun with it.
Well, and they have different face targets. They got tic-tac-toe targets, which is kind of fun to play. You got the normal tic-tac-toe. You have 5 arrows. You got to get 3 in a row. And the fun part is, okay, if you do get 3 in a row and you want to take one of them away, you just have to get closer to the center. Whoever's close to the center gets that spot. So you have to play a little strategy, because you got 5 arrows. So if you want to take one away, that's one less you make yours. So that's kind of a fun one. They also have darts, like regular throwing darts. They have big faces that you can play darts with your bow and arrow on there. They have some with decks of cards on them, so you can play cards. And I'm drawing a blank. There's a couple more that I actually have those targets.
Oh yeah. I used to play in a darts league when I was in college. We had an archery shop close by, and that was one of the things that we did, is we actually had a dart league. We shot 3-spot one night a week. We shot 5-spot another night a week. And then we actually all got together and shot darts. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, you really think, oh, it's, like people say shooting a 3-spot. All you got to do is put it in there every time. That's not hard to do. Yeah. Think about shooting your bow and then try to go play dart league with somebody and shoot that little bitty red line, and play darts. It's a lot of fun, and it's a lot harder even at 20 yards than people think it would be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just all just having fun. And, there's a lot of smaller paper animal targets and,
Oh
so you
yeah.
can shoot different animals and, just, get some target and put them up there and
Yep.
shoot at them. That's the, that's the fun part is there's so many things you can do with it.
Oh yeah. Get your buddies together, take your hunting bows out, and go find a techno hunt somewhere and shoot the live screen animals running around, whether it's elk or buffalo or
Yeah.
goats or whatever. I mean, there's just so much to it.
Yeah. Those that don't know what that is, that's a video screen. It shows that has a video playing of different animals, different situations. And you take your bow and your arrows, change the tip to a mushroom tip, and then it knows where you hit and then it scores it. Kind of fun to do.
It's a lot of fun. We used to do that for bow season tune-ups. We'd get a group of guys together and go find a techno hunt somewhere, and it wasn't too expensive to sit in there for a couple hours a day and shoot animals that you may not get to hunt this year, but
Yeah.
still get to go enjoy it. So
Get you used to picking a spot on the animal instead of just shooting at a spot.
that's right. That's right. And that's, it's kind of hard to do. Us as 3D archers, we are spoiled a little bit because we get to shoot all these foam animals. But, I think about a lot of guys that go hunting that, and gals that just, shoot some type of a foam target every day that has dots on it. But then when it comes time to going to hunt that animal, they're not used to picking that spot behind the shoulder or what the anatomy of that animal is. And it's like, if you've got that block target, that's a great way. Go buy some 2D paper faces that are just the outlines or a picture of that animal to get used to, where to shoot. For the longest time, I would have mistakenly shot turkeys wrong because I didn't understand truly when I was younger the anatomy of a turkey and where you would actually want to shoot that animal. But you could go buy that 2D paper target that actually shows you where to hit it, and then you get better at picking that spot on a live animal. So
Well, and then too, like you do the 3D shoots and like you're shooting at a deer target, where the 8 ring and 10 ring and 12 rings are at isn't necessarily where you're going to shoot it
no.
because that's the scoring ring. And if you're shooting down at one, you're still going to shoot for that scoring ring. That may not be you want. If on the ground, you're going to shoot the real animal differently. So, it's good to be able to pick a spot, but you need to know in a real situation,
Yep.
where would you actually aim? And those targets are kind of nice because, I always tell people to look at the exit. Where do you want the
Yep.
arrow to exit? Not the entrance. Look at the exit.
Yep.
Because that's going to tell you, if you're shooting at such a steep angle that the arrow comes out the bottom, you're not going to have a blood trail for a long time
Right.
because it's all plugged up. If you're shooting up, you don't want to shoot high on them because you're not going to have a blood trail. So, you
Well, and
that's just
that's a
experience
part
getting
of,
out there.
yeah, and that is interesting because this buck that I killed last year in Kansas, a lot of people don't think about that exit hole, or they don't think about the angle that they're at. And that's where target archery for me has helped me be a more proficient hunter. The animal that I shot out in Kansas was at 4.5 yards. I was 22 feet in the air, but the angle that I was at, if I would have tried to shoot that animal with a 20-yard pin, I would have either missed or possibly wounded that animal, because of the steep angle. I was at like a 52-degree angle to be able to shoot that animal. Well, I had to shoot him at almost like 45 or 46 yards to get the proper trajectory because he was so close. And I've had conversations with guys about that, and it's mind blowing to think, well, my rangefinder says whatever. And it's like, well, most rangefinders tap out, at that 30 or 35-degree angle. So unless you've played with a lot of the angle compensation, It's hard to know that. And target archery for me has helped me understand that. And fortunately, I was lucky enough that when I was sitting in that tree looking down at a trail that came right by me, I ranged that trail. My rangefinder kept saying like 7.5, 8 yards. And I thought, man, that doesn't look that far from the tree. So I took it off angle compensation and ranged it. And sure enough, it was 4.5 yards, but it was at a 52-degree angle. And I have a app on my phone for target archery, and I plugged in those exact, situations for the bow that I had. And it told me flat out it was like 47 or 48 yards is what I needed to dial my sight to get the proper angle compensation. And, that's the crazy part about archery that, maybe gets overlooked, like we talked about earlier with differences in form or equipment or whatever else. It's knowing that angle, knowing the exit of where that arrow needs to come out to cleanly harvest that animal. And, that's stuff that I challenge people, when we talk about archery is, learning to understand from a hunting situation how much angles and height that you're up in a tree make a difference.
Yeah, well, the way I like to explain that is, all carpenters know what a 3-4-5 triangle is.
Yep.
Because they do it all the time. That gives you a right angle. So what that is one leg is 3, the other leg is 4, and the angle between the two is 5. So what I like to tell people is like, okay, you have a trail that is 30 feet away from your tree stand, straight out, but you're 40 feet up in a tree. Now, straight angle, without angle compensation, you're going to range it and you're going to say it's 50 yards. What do you shoot it for? And a lot of us say, well, 50. No, you just shot over its back by long ways. You got to shoot it for 30. Because the reason for that is gravity works horizontally. So how far are you traveling horizontal is all the arrow cares about. That's what you shoot it for. So I had one where the trail was 20 yards away, but I'm at the top of a hill on top of a tree. So I'm probably, good 40, 50 feet up from where the trail is. And so what I do is I take from the trail, look up, so straight across, okay, I'm going to range that tree that's on that trail straight across. So it's 20 yards. It was 20-yard trail all day long. Here comes walking down there. Now, if you use one of those that go by the size of the animal, it is said it's probably a 50-yard shot or better. I shot it for 20 because I knew that trail was 20 yards away and I got it. It stuck the arrow right where it's supposed to go, and I killed the deer because I shot it for 20, not what it looked like. And it's one of those things that just like, I know that this is a 20-yard trail. I've looked at it and I've estimated this before. That was even before I had rangefinder. You just get used to judging the distances, which is a disadvantage of having a rangefinder is you don't learn how to do it without one. But that's the thing you had to look at. And the other thing to remember on shooting those real close ones is where the arrow is generally by your lips and your hand out there. Now, where's your eye and your sights? It's up the distance between the corner of your mouth and your eyes. Probably, 4 inches or so.
Yep.
So now the arrow is 4 inches below your sights. So when you shoot close range, take, for those that want to try it, go just out, 5 feet away from you, draw a circle and aim at that circle and see your arrow hits. It's going to hit 4 inches low or whatever the distance between your eyes and the sight and the arrow. So now at close range, you're low. You're shooting low. So at some point they're going to get, meat. So I was on a platform and there was a gator 5 feet from the platform. And I knew because I had one of those sight tapes on there that I figured out. It's like, okay, at 5 feet, I need to shoot my 70-yard pin. And because we're raised up, your form, a lot of people do the form, then just drop their arm. That's not your form. So you draw up, standing up straight, bend at the hips until you get, so I'm leaning against the rail, bending down. And when my pin that I knew was supposed to be there, my 70-yard pin hit it, I stopped and then I started drawing. I shot, went through my shot process. I shot, stuck it right where it's supposed to be. And of course, I'm leaning over so far, I had trouble standing back up, but
Yep.
And somebody would say, well, I just sight down the arrow. Have you ever shot that way? Oh, no, I just sight down the arrow.
Yeah.
If you don't practice that,
luck.
how are you going to know? So
Yep.
that's something you got to think of, the close shots. And I've been on ranges where they purposely set a target in the 5 to 10 feet range.
Yep.
Knowing that people are going to miss it. This is easy. Put 20-yard pin and go. No, they'd shoot low every time and miss it. And either get a 5 because it just hit the bottom of it, or a 0. And that purposely because of that close range shot. And
Yep. They do that out at Reading at like 3 feet, I think it is. And, there's all the pros get it because everybody's done it long enough and watched other people and talk about it and spend the time. But understanding those cut charts to know how much you need to come down based on feed. I mean, it's like I said, that's what helped me harvest that deer in Kansas, is having that target background, because I never would have done it. How many people honestly think about, oh, I need to go up to a target at 5 feet and figure out how my bow shoots, let alone then put a 20-foot angle or, a 10-foot angle, whatever you are up in a tree, into consideration with it. And, there's a lot to this that it goes back to, like you said, constantly learning and developing your skills and figuring out more about what you can do. Is, for those listening or get to see this, go play with those short shots, go play with those way under 20-yard shots, and figure out that you better be looking at a 30 and a 40 or a 50-yard pin, or else chances of hitting what you're trying to harvest is you're going to miss.
Yeah, I know. When I was doing some of my videos, I was creating down in my basement. I don't have much room in my basement, so my target was probably 10 feet away.
Yeah.
And I've got it's an old 1870s house. So the basement is just a bunch of bricks, and there's a ledge up there. Well, the ledge is a little too high, but I set my target up there. So I'm practicing. Okay. So I'm doing the video. It's like, okay, I make sure I don't stick this arrow into the brick. So I had to make sure that, I'm aiming up high enough on there, and not go too high, make sure I'm doing it so I can, show how to do different stuff. And, because I don't want to stick my arrow in there, because that would not be fun to have an arrow come flying back at you.
No,
Because I hit a concrete block. Yeah. Not that I don't have plenty of arrows, but I hate wasting one if I don't need to.
That's right.
I'm cheap. I have arrows, they work. I don't want to buy any more.
No. It doesn't get any cheaper. Let's just keep what we got and make the most efficient use of them.
Yeah. Well, we've been talking for quite a while here now, so we should probably let you go, finish your day. And
well, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you having me on, and look forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I enjoy talking with you. Obviously, because we've talked for a couple hours anyway. So I think we probably, it's been a good couple hours plus.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's been real great having you on here, and we'll be talking to you later, I'm sure of that. And we'll chat in the group too, and we'll just help anybody out that has any questions.
Yeah.
And once again, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. My name is Roy Canterbury, and I've been your host today on Arch Talk 101.